Chapter 1909. It was a very serious scene. Kelowna's evil dragon was sitting in front of Luo Dance with her arms crossed expressionlessly. The cake crumbs on the computer screen were still there, and the character, "Your man doesn't want you anymore," was written on the screen. She was lying on the ground and ignored. Her teammate was very anxious. "My throat is still very painful, as if it was stabbed by a hard object for 3 days and 3 nights. Do you understand?" Kelowna's evil dragon's voice was not as gentle as before. It was hoarse. Butterfly Monster could only put her hands on her knees, lowering her head. I'll get you some loquat water." She was about to stand up. "Is that the problem?" Kelowna's evil dragon raised her voice. Butterfly Monster trembled as if she got an electric shock. Then she quickly sat down again with her hands on her knees, lowering her head and looking like she was about to cry. The evil dragon couldn't be angry now. Long Shirua sighed and rubbed her eyebrows. Then what?" Luo Dance asked tentatively. Kelowna's Shinryu frowned. "You said that bad woman came back. Is it true?" "Yes." Luo Dance nodded. "Didn't you just eat the cake?" Miss Dragon changed back to Kelowna's evil dragon. Now she only felt pain in her stomach and throat, as if she had just eaten a dead cockroach. Her whole body was inexplicably painful. "Don't mention it, I can't get over it." "So sorry." Long Shiro rubbed her eyebrows again. She felt that it was still difficult for her to calm down, so she gave herself a tranquilizer, which was always on the side. Recently, players would often die mysteriously in the game. They would either be backstabbed at the last moment when they were fighting a room boss, or they would fall into a trap vortex while walking. Furthermore, they would only get "keep up your good" when they were lucky enough to get a lucky draw. Her blood pressure soared, and there seemed to be more acne on her face. Why was she so miserable? If she didn't put some tranquilizer beside her, she felt that she couldn't control herself. Control. In that case, is it just that bad woman? Kelowna's evil dragon suddenly asked. "Only." The little butterfly monster was startled at first, then reacted quickly. "Yes, only Yu Yi Jia. That bad woman was shopping in the supermarket alone. I met you, that bad woman in the supermarket." "That's not what I was asking." "What's that?" You mean you came back alone?" The evil dragon from the Divine Prefecture's tone had already weakened by a third. "Oh, the boss is back too." The little butterfly monster immediately reacted and said with a smile, "Sister Long, are you going to find the boss? Who told you that I'm going to look for that profiteer?" Kelowna's evil dragon roared and snorted coldly. "I'm just worried that this profiteer would come back at such a critical time. I don't know what he's planning." "You don't believe me?" "I believe you." Luo Dance raised her head and stood up quickly, flattering her. "Sister Long, I also bought watermelon. I'll cut 2 slices for you to moisten your throat. As for the watermelon that Yu Yi Jia picked, I'd better not tell her, right?" She ran out of the room quickly as if she was fleeing for her life. Kelowna's Shinryu stared at her but couldn't glare at anyone. She had to shake her legs impatiently, muttering to herself, "She's back. Why didn't she tell me? Why did she come back at this time? No, I have to ask her." Kelowna's Shinryu walked quickly to the window, opening it and stepping on it. "It's Lord Long. Lord Long is coming out." Dragon, pack. The window could only be pushed back. Long Shirua grabbed her messy greasy hair frantically. Could she not get out? She had to think of a way. Inside the venue of the World Superhuman Summit Conference, they were guessing which sponsor this media belonged to. This was the front row of the interview area provided for the media. Those who could be arranged here were basically the representatives of the big countries, also known as the national teams. However, the problem was that all the top media companies in the big countries knew each other very well, but they still couldn't find out who this investor was even though they had searched through all the channels. It seemed to be a Chinese, but it was obviously not an official media. They were whispering, and some intended to come forward to make contact. But they didn't take any action. Everything was just brewing. There's a powerful force brewing in my stomach. I think I may need to go to the washroom? Old Q said timidly. He didn't look like a muscular man at all. Auntie Rin was also restless at this time. Only Lizzie was calm. Let him be strong, I'll stuff snacks into my mouth, unmoving like a mountain. At this moment, a group of people wearing black suits and work passes around their necks walked quickly into the venue. This group of people attracted everyone's attention, especially the young man who was leading the group. He was serious in speech and manner, and he gave off an oppressive aura. Auntie Ren's eyes lit up, not because of the young man's appearance, but because of the aura that this group of people exuded. They didn't seem like ordinary people. They were like soldiers. Only a special department could cultivate such a powerful aura. Finally, under everyone's gaze, the group of people walked to the stage. The man in the lead stood up and said loudly, "Let me introduce myself. My name is Yen Xiaoxi. I'm the head of the Department of Science in the External Special Affairs Department of the Kelowna Special Affairs Administration. I'm also in charge of everything for this summit." Flashes of light instantly exploded in the venue. However, a man in black behind Yen Xiaoxi walked out coldly. He was holding a small box in his hand. He pressed it casually, and an ear-piercing sound was heard. The flashing equipment in the venue instantly emitted a squeaking sound. All of a sudden, the reporters who were holding long cannons and short guns got a great shock. Their equipment was directly damaged at this time. There was a commotion. This seems to be a new type of electromagnetic equipment, they guessed. Since when did China have such advanced equipment? Yen Xiaoxi took a microphone and said in a calm voice, "I'm sorry to have damaged your equipment. We'll be responsible for the compensation. Now, I'll explain some of the requirements of the upcoming summit. Everyone, please pay attention." However, an angry Caucasian reporter rushed out at this time and said in fluent Chinese, "You're depriving us of our freedom of the press." He wanted to say more. Yen Xiaoxi waved his hand, and two men in black suits immediately dragged the Caucasian reporter out. "You can go back to your respective embassies to lodge a complaint. It's not a problem at all to lodge a complaint in your country." Section Chief Yen was still as nonchalant as ever. "However, if you don't cooperate, you'll be disqualified from this interview. This is China. I hope you'll abide by the rules here and don't cause trouble for both parties. Do you have any questions? Before the summit begins, I can spare some time to solve them for you in 5 minutes." Yen Xiaoxi then took a seat in front of the rostrum. At this moment, the reporters below the rostrum began walking around. In short, the first thing they did was to pick up their phones and call their sponsors. Who is this person? How could there be a sponsor among the reporters of a third-rate magazine? Even if there was, Ren Xiling didn't think that calling Song Ing would help at this juncture. The magazine was acquired by the Song Dynasty Group. When Ren Xiling met with Song Ing previously, she roughly knew that the Song Dynasty's purpose in acquiring the media was to develop the Song Dynasty Group and build a good reputation. Apart from her own third-rate magazine, the Song Dynasty had also bought many other similar media outlets. This was a normal business practice. Hence, Auntie Rin really didn't think that such a sponsor would be able to help her at this time. The atmosphere was still tense and oppressive. Among them, the Chinese official media was probably the most relaxed. After all, they were the official media, and they probably already knew about some things in advance. At this moment, Yen Xiaoxi was sizing up the media in the interview area. She had a report in her hand, which was a list of the media outlets that would be reporting today. As expected, they were all on the list. How did this unit sneak in? Section Chief Yen, who had sharp eyes, noticed some strange places on the list almost at first glance. He immediately looked up at a certain position in the first row of the interview area. At this moment, Section Chief Yan's black-rimmed glasses even vibrated a little strangely. This was a device developed by Dr. Zhao of the Administrative Research Institute. It could distinguish between humans and demons based on individual heat sources and the wavelength of body radiation. Why are there demons? Let me ask, the subordinate hurriedly replied. 2 minutes later, the subordinate returned with a strange expression. Looking at Section Chief Yan's expressionless face, he braced himself and said, I've asked. This seems to be a company under the name of the Tao Sect Association. Tao Sect Association? Yan Xiaoxi couldn't help but be stunned. Since when did the Tao Sect Association have a media outlet under them? It's something that happened recently. The subordinate quickly said. Earlier on, a new secretary was appointed to the Tao Sect Association, and then there were many new policies. This media outlet's interview qualification seems to have been forcefully shoved in like this. Arranging the interview is the responsibility of the Publicity and Foreign Affairs Department, and it's not under our jurisdiction. A new secretary? Yan Xiaoxi pondered for a moment. It's that guy called Song Haoren, right? Yes. The subordinate nodded and continued. Also, on the surface, this media outlet is a company under the Song dynasty. The person in charge of the Song dynasty is called Song Ying, and she's Song Haoren's niece. She's also the successor of the Song dynasty's third generation. This Song family has been relying on the Tao Sect Association since the Mount Tai incident, and they've been up to quite a lot recently. This interview qualification seems to be a little too much. However, Yan Xiaoxi suddenly waved her hand. Let's leave the Song family's matter as it is. This isn't something we should care about, and it's not time for us to care about it yet. After the meeting ends later, go and call that female demon out alone and check her identity record. If there's nothing wrong with it, we'll leave it for the time being. However, Song Haoren's problem was really a problem. Such a young man had made the entire Tao sect and demon realm owe him a huge favor. Yan Xiaoxi felt extremely tired just thinking about the hundreds of Tao sect and demon realm tokens in Song Haoren's hand. This was an unimaginably terrifying power. It was hard to say about the demon realm, but the Tao Sect Association, the Tao Sect experts involved too many high-ranking officials and nobles. Got it, the subordinate quickly replied. 3 minutes passed very quickly. The media outlets that were initially filled with righteous indignation seemed to have reached a tacit agreement at this moment as they quietly returned to their original seat. The investors' unified response was, "Be good. In that case, I'll distribute a brochure regarding this summit meeting to everyone. Please take a look carefully." Section Chief Yan looked around and said calmly, "It should be about to start inside, right?" Sir Ma, who had just gone to the washroom, returned with a bottle of water. He found Ali, who was working outside the venue, and brought the water over. The two of them sat at the side and chatted casually. "It's about time. I took a look at the scheduled time. It should be around this time," Ali said after taking a look at her watch. "You're not qualified to go in?" Sir Ma couldn't help but ask in surprise. Ali smiled bitterly. "Don't think so highly of me. I'm just a small staff member in my own department. Everything in the venue is handled by that department, and I can't interfere with anything else." Old Ma scratched his head. "That's strange. How did old Rin get in?" "Let's not talk about this." Ali shook her head and immediately looked at Ma Haud, suddenly asking, "Old Ma, what do you think?" "What do you mean?" Sir Ma asked in confusion. Ali said seriously, "The world we're in now." "The world we're in now." Sir Ma raised his head and looked at the clouds in the sky absent-mindedly. "Speaking of which, how should we look at it?" He had never thought about this question. Or rather, he wasn't ready to accept this question. "Perhaps for us humans," Sir Ma said slowly, "everything happened too quickly." Ali was silent for a moment and suddenly said, "Old Ma, how much is your salary now?" Why are you asking this?" Ma Haud was startled. "You've been to my workplace before, how can you not know my salary?" Ali said. "If you can, you should grit your teeth and buy more properties." The land price of this city will increase at a terrifying speed that you can't imagine. How terrifying can it be? Sir Ma couldn't help but joke. It can't be surpassing the first line, right? This city, Ali said unexpectedly at this time, may be the safest place in the whole world. You know, I've heard that all supernatural powers are ineffective here. The higher-ups seem to intend to build the first experimental city in the world where humans and supernatural beings can live together. Sir Ma was shocked and couldn't seem to react in the end. He asked subconsciously, Ali, are you using public resources for private purposes? After saying this, Sir Ma covered his mouth and looked around nervously. Ali didn't say anything. She just stood up and patted Sir Ma's shoulder. Go back and discuss it with your wife. You should tell whoever you want. Ma Howd suddenly smiled bitterly. You don't have to beat around the bush, why don't you tell her directly? You have to ask me. Ali shrugged and said indifferently, It's time to work, Officer Ma. TSK Woman. Chapter 1910. It should be around here. A sneaky figure was wandering in the shopping street. Many shops were closed, so this place was quite deserted. Therefore, no matter how careful this figure was, it was quite conspicuous. It was in the middle of July, but it was wearing a big windbreaker with a hat covering its nose, and a pair of sunglasses and a collar covering its mouth. It should be around here, the shop. But it seemed that it couldn't find the place in its memory, which made it a little irritable. Its pace was sometimes fast and sometimes slow, as if it had nowhere to go. 3 more minutes. If I can't find it, I'll go back. It made up its mind. However, the decision that it had made with great difficulty soon began to waver again. It could not help but begin to consider some possible problems. For example, will it be too proactive if I go to the shop like this? Speaking of which, the last time, I didn't get any response. Will that guy not want to meet me? Or I'll go back? Scared? Go back now. It took a deep breath, clenching its fists as if it had made up its mind. Look at the sky, scared. But when it decided not to search for more than 3 minutes and turned around, a terrible thing happened. Miss Long, are you looking for me? First, it took a deep breath slowly and gradually raised its eyelids. It lowered its head and then walked quickly with a hoarse voice. You've got the wrong person. Just like that, they brushed past each other. Their movements were stiff but swift. Boss Luo smiled. I'm waiting for you here, Miss Long. Are you interested in walking around with me? The stiff figure suddenly stopped moving. Then, he retraced his steps and took off his sunglasses. What did you say? Boss Luo smiled. This mustache is quite interesting. Kelowna took off the sunglasses. There was a fake mustache under Shinryu's nose. I want to walk around before dinner. Boss Luo said softly. I won't let you work for nothing. In return, I'll tell you a piece of information for free. With a slight frown, he tore off the mustache above his lips. Kelowna's Shinryu made a hissing sound. This thing shouldn't be afraid of falling off, so it stuck to me so tightly. It's so suspicious that it's as painful as tearing off armpit hair. There was still a burning pain on her lips, but Long Shirua glared at her. What are you looking at? You're still laughing. I'll make you laugh to death. Long Shirua felt as if her eyes were in a whirlpool, and a wave of heat rushed to her by Hui Acupoint. Her entire body felt as if it was cooked. This was a pedestrian rest area under the pedestrian street overpass. The kind that was sponsored by the Happy Water manufacturer. I haven't moved the shop's facade back yet. Boss Luo stopped smiling and said calmly, That's why we can't enter from the outside. That's rare. Not doing business? Long Shirua asked curiously. Boss Luo said, The shop's opening hours are shorter, isn't that what Ms. Long wants to see? Kelowna's Shinryu muttered, Don't make it sound like you're reducing the opening hours because of me. That's such a nice way to put it. Boss Luo pretended that he didn't hear it clearly. Nothing. She emphasized and then said quickly, Why did you suddenly come back? Is it because of the summit meeting? Are you plotting something? Ms. Long doesn't want me to come back? Boss Luo looked into her eyes and asked. *T. Feeling as if an arrow had pierced through her heart, the true dragon of godly lands suddenly felt suffocated. Her IQ and EQ seemed to be plummeting at this time, even to a dangerous level. His brain was in a mess, and his breathing was not smooth, as if he was sick. The true dragon of the divine land only felt that he had become extremely terrible at this time. He tried hard to keep his head clear, but he could not stop even if he wanted to. Kelowna's Shinryu bit her tongue and pretended to be angry. Like your ass? I want you to go as far away as possible. It's best if you don't appear here ever again. Boss Luo was still looking at her quietly. Kelowna's Shinryu's heart was beating fast, and she couldn't stand it anymore. Her fingers gripped the chair tightly. She lowered her head and said timidly, "It's not that you can't come back. As long as you don't do anything bad, it's okay." "I've thought about it before," Boss Luo said suddenly. "Think about what?" Long Shirua was startled and opened her mouth slightly. "Just like what Ms. Long said, don't appear here ever again," Luochu said softly. "No." She stood up and stared at Boss Luo. She pressed her hands on Boss Luo's shoulders and blurted out, "You can't. You can't be so irresponsible. You made this city become like this and now you want to leave without caring about anything? No way." Huff, huff, huff. Kelowna's Shinryu's hands pressed on Boss Luo's shoulders. Her breathing became heavier and heavier, and her eyes became unfocused. In the end, she actually fainted. Just as she was about to fall, Boss Luo gently waved his hand so that Long Shirua could lie down on the table steadily. Boss Luo couldn't help but fall into deep thought. A report about the experimental subjects that he had seen in Cicero's experimental field surfaced in his mind. It should be several generations. The flaws don't seem to have been fixed. Kelowna's Shinryu certainly didn't have the kind of physique that fainted whenever she came into contact with someone of the opposite sex. Otherwise, the only people who had been beaten up in Kelowna for so many years would be nuns, demons, and ghosts. However, it wasn't a good idea to let Long Shirua faint here. Boss Luo, who liked to take advantage of the situation, subconsciously looked around. There were many shops in the commercial pedestrian street and naturally, there was no shortage of small hotels for temporary use. Immediately, such advertising slogans came into view. A sex hotel. Experience passion with your lover. A love of the ocean, mirror flower butterfly, perfect couple, more than 10 theme suites for you to choose. Most special. 60 yuan per hour. Well, Luo Dance calculated the time and felt that Sister Long's anger should have subsided by now. So, she went upstairs with the cut watermelon. However, she couldn't find Long Shirua in the room. Instead, the computer was still on. It seemed that the game was still running and was in the battle stage. Anyway, the screen was full of red words. Little Butterfly didn't play games much, so she didn't care too much about it. She turned off the screen and went out. She looked up and down but still couldn't find Long Shirua. She couldn't help but feel a little strange. Did he go out? The little butterfly muttered to herself. But soon, she heard some strange sounds from a utility room on the ground floor of the pet hospital. Little Butterfly walked quickly and immediately saw the floor of the utility room began to open slowly. "Sister Long, where are you going?" Luo Dance asked subconsciously. There was a very large underground space under the floor. It was made by Sister Long in the past, and was specially used to train Mo Xiaofei and Juefeng. In the past 2 days, the senior monster had been blocking the door. The little butterfly monster also used this underground training ground when she went shopping. It had an exit that led directly to a ruined building outside. However, the one who walked out from the fully open floor wasn't Kelowna's Shinryu, but another person who knew this way. Mo Xiaofei. Wow. Xiaofei. Sister Dance, long time no see. Sit down and serve tea. The little butterfly monster sat down and said in surprise, Xiao Fei, didn't you go to the plateau with Madame Purple Star and the others? Why did you suddenly come back? Oh, is it because of the summit meeting? Mo Xiaofei seemed to have grown up in the impression of Little Butterfly after not seeing him for several months. His skin was a little darker and the outline of his face was clearer. There was also an indescribable sense of oppression. Mo Xiaofei took the teacup with a smile at this time. Yes, it is indeed because of the summit meeting. Miss Zixing is the young leader of the Greedy Wolf clan, so she was invited to this meeting. Luo Dance was startled at this time and thought for a while, but isn't it Xuefeng? Xuefeng's matter hasn't been officially disclosed yet. Mo Xiaofei said seriously, the Greedy Wolf clan has its own plan. As for Xuefeng, Miss Zixing is still the leader of the Greedy Wolf clan. The little butterfly monster wasn't too interested in politics. Just knowing about it was enough. She nodded. So it's not just Xiao Fei, Zhe Feng and Madame Purple Star are also here? Xuefeng didn't come this time. Mo Xiaofei thought for a while and said, he is now cultivating in the Greedy Wolf clan's holy land. Miss Zixing is very strict. Well, this time, only me and some of her clansmen came together. Speaking of which, I still hitched a ride. When did you arrive? Just now. Mo Xiaofei said, Miss Zixing is now reporting to the administration. I want to come and see my master before I go home. I haven't seen her for a while. I don't know how she is now. I haven't heard from her recently. Is she not at home? Sister Long went out, but she didn't say where she was going. Luo Dance shook her head. I saw a lot of people outside. Are they from the monster clan? Mo Xiaofei frowned at this time. Master, will there be any problem? Of course not. Little Butterfly smiled. Sister Long is the Shinryu of Kelowna. What can happen to her? Maybe she went out to relax. You're right. Mo Xiaofei nodded. With Master's ability, there are not many people in this world who can hurt her. My worry seems to be unnecessary. Mo Xiaofei thought with self-mockery. With the status and ability of the Shinryu of Kelowna, I can't worry about her being knocked down by roadside punks and then taken to the Clock Hotel or something like that. Since Master is not at home, then I'll go home first. Mo Xiaofei stood up at this time and said goodbye. I guess my parents will scold me to death for running away without saying a word. By the way, there's something here. If Master comes back, please help me give it to her. Okay. Luo Dance nodded and took over the things Mo Xiaofei gave her. It was a wrapped wooden box, but Luo Dance didn't ask what was inside. She wasn't curious about these things. If Xiaofei wanted to let her know, he would tell her. Well, I'll go now. Mo Xiaofei smiled. So fast. Little Butterfly hurriedly chased out. Xiaofei, I've cut the watermelon, why don't you leave so fast? Little Butterfly shook her head, walking to the window and slightly opening the curtain. The monsters guarding outside had sharp eyes. Once they saw the curtain swaying, they immediately stood up. A group of guys were about to surround her. Little Butterfly was scared and hurriedly closed the curtain. When will Sister Long come back? You've cut a lot of watermelons. Her head was still heavy and dizzy. When she opened her eyes, Long Shirua saw a warm light. Her body was covered by something soft. She even had a feeling that she didn't want to get up. This was a bed, a very comfortable big bed. And there was the smell of incense. Well, bed. Kelowna of Shinryu suddenly took a breath of cold air, holding the white quilt and sitting up. What came into her eyes was a rather exquisite and luxurious room. It was a hotel suite. The kind of room that the overbearing CEO liked to take women to in Korean dramas. Why was it here? Just now, it should be. The commercial street, yes. I was in the commercial street just now. Kelowna of Shinryu rubbed her head. What was I doing in the commercial street? Yes, I saw him. Then what? Then the hotel, the suite? Kelowna of Shinryu took a breath of cold air. She lowered her head, looking at the quilt that was tightly covered by her. She gulped, calm down, calm down. It's okay, it's okay. She suddenly closed her eyes and removed the blanket covering her. Then, she shrunk her neck and opened one of her eyes slightly, peeking into the blanket as if she was peeking. F***ck. Her clothes were taken off. Kelowna of Shinryu suddenly jumped up. Her black windbreaker was taken off. That was all. Kelowna of Shinryu immediately patted her forehead, clenching her fists as if she wanted to hit someone. She growled like a beast. Why is it just a coat? You're awake, Ms. Long. Boss Luo came out from behind the screen with a glass of water in his hand. Seeing Kelowna of Shinryu of Kelowna standing on the bed, he asked curiously, Ms. Long, what are you doing? Kelowna of Kelowna had nowhere to put her hands behind her back. I'm exercising. Exercising? Yes, exercising. Long-distance exercise is good. Exercise, you see. Ahahaha. National Primary and Secondary School 9th Radio Exercise. 1, 2, 3, 4. Chapter 1911. Kelowna's Shinryu soon calmed down. What kind of chest exercises were taught in primary and secondary schools in the country? That was just her imagination. If she really did that in front of others, she would probably dig 3 feet into the ground with her bare hands and bury herself alive, even if she was in a forbidden space. She just stretched her arms casually, that was all. Kelowna's Shinryu, who had calmed down, soon felt something was wrong. She held her forehead and knocked it lightly. What's wrong with me? She couldn't help but suspect that it was Profiteer's doing. He had done it to her several times. For example, the time when he became longer and the time when he beat her in the basement of the villa on Mount Tai. Drink it first, you'll feel better. Boss Luo put the cup in front of Kelowna's Shinryu. Long Shirua took it doubtfully and put it in front of her nose to sniff. There was no special smell, as if it was really just a cup of water. She was silent for a moment and finally drank it obediently. The reason was that, if there was anything, he could have done it when she fainted. There was no need to wait until she woke up. What's this? But after a few mouthfuls, Kelowna's Shinryu felt something was wrong. She raised her head in surprise. The dizziness in her brain seemed to have subsided. She felt refreshed and refreshed. Boss Luo said, it should be something called spiritual liquid, mist condensed by Reiki. Spiritual liquid? Kelowna's Shinryu was startled. How could she not know what spiritual liquid looked like? Boss Luo smiled. Miss Long, if you're free, you can go to the suburbs to take in some fresh air. It's not good for your health to stay in your room for a long time. Who stays in my room all day? I went out the day before yesterday and beat up some people. Actually, she only went out of her room once when Old Fox was accidentally injured, but Kelowna's Shinryu still snorted and immediately reacted. You mean, there's something wrong with my body? Probably. Boss Luo nodded. Miss Long's power comes from the support of the earth in Kelowna. Although there's some in your body, you've been used to the earth's Reiki for a long time. If you don't get the Reiki for a long time, you'll have some symptoms. For example, the withdrawal reaction of people who quit smoking. She was also a doctor. Although she only had a license as a veterinarian, how could she not know about the withdrawal reaction? Why didn't I have such a reaction when I was in the inhuman domain? Kelowna's Shinryu couldn't help but feel doubtful. Boss Luo said, although the inhuman domain can't provide energy to Miss Long all the time like the earth in Kelowna, at least you can absorb some of the energy in the air to solve your problem. But in this place, I'm afraid that the only way for Miss Long to absorb energy is through food. Of course, normal food can't provide enough energy to support Shinryu's body. If the food intake is not balanced and there's no nutrition, the situation will be worse. Food. Happy water, potato chips, fried chicken, chicken feet, sunflower seeds. What have I been eating recently? In other words, as long as I leave the city once in a while, I'll be fine, right? Kelowna's Shinryu frowned. In theory, yes. Boss Luo nodded. Kelowna's Shinryu pondered for a moment and frowned. Then? Why are you telling me this? Boss Luo smiled. Before we came out, didn't we agree that if Miss Long walks with me, I'll give you a piece of information for free? That's it? Kelowna's Shinryu couldn't help but open her mouth. Boss Luo nodded with a smile. What else? No. Nothing. Kelowna's Shinryu suddenly lowered her head. She seemed to be thinking about something and her toes curled up under the blanket. So that's the reason why he waited for me. He obviously wanted to tell me about this, didn't he? But why did she have to make an exchange? Humph, she's so arrogant, this profiteer. Is this care? Humph, I'm still a little dizzy. Kelowna's Shinryu tilted her head. Do you have any more of this spiritual liquid? Can you give me another cup? You can't be so stingy that you can't even give me 1 cup of spiritual liquid, right? Boss Luo just smiled. The empty cup was once again filled with this kind of liquefied spiritual liquid. The true dragon of the divine land drank it all up like drinking beer without saying a word. Her mind felt refreshed again, and the dizziness subsided a little. It was already at the point where she doubted her endurance. She thought that it would be better to have another drink, but she couldn't bring herself to do it. She thought that she should go to the suburbs later. The suburbs might not be safe enough, so she should go to a place further away. The inner part of the city was in a state of absolute prohibition. The outer part of the city showed a decreasing trend. The administrative bureau had already done their research. They had to go to a place that was at least 50 kilometers away from the city in order for the spiritual energy to be in a normal state. Silence. In the silence, Kelowna's Shinryu felt uncomfortable and said slowly, "Oh right, the thing you said before. Are you serious?" "What thing?" Kelowna's Shinryu rolled her eyes. "You already know the answer." Boss Luo smiled. "Many times we have all kinds of ideas. However, we don't have to do it. Of course, it doesn't mean that we won't do it. After all, we still need a way to make it happen, guidance and so on." "You didn't say anything," Kelowna's Shinryu said impatiently. "Why don't you just say it and see if I'm in a good mood?" Boss Luo sat down and smiled. "Now that I'm with Ms. Long, I'm in a good mood." Maybe it was an illusion. Kelowna's Shinryu suddenly felt dizzy, but it was not as serious as before. She bit her lips and looked at Boss Luo. It seemed to be the problem of the angle. From this angle, she could see the cabinet in the room behind Boss Luo. You all know that some hotel suites will display the most conspicuous items in the most conspicuous places, such as instant noodles, soft drinks, wine, and even small square boxes with 2 small pieces of rubber hidden in them. "I need to go to the washroom." She rushed into the bathroom in the suite as if she was running away. Kelowna's Shinryu's face was splashed with cold water. She had been watering herself in the wash basin for more than a minute. Cool down. Kelowna's Shinryu's spirit was refreshed, but she didn't rush to go out. Instead, she sat on the toilet lid and rested her chin on her hand, thinking. She found a serious problem. She had this problem in the past, but it was not this serious. Whenever she appeared in front of this profiteer, she would feel uncomfortable. For example, her heart would be in a mess, her breathing would be rapid, she would feel inexplicably irritated when she saw him, but she would feel even more irritated when he didn't see her. She would only use the simplest and most violent way to do things without using her brain. She was getting lazier and lazier. "I didn't expect that I would fall so deep into the mud." Long Shirua couldn't help but laugh bitterly. These were the symptoms. This was clearly the kind of childish behavior that she often used to diss those little demons who were only 100 or 200 years old and had just transformed into human form not too long ago for the sake of so-called love. "I can't go on like this." Kelowna's Shinryu took a deep breath. She patted her cheeks and stood up excitedly. She had more or less recovered her former self. However, when she opened the door and walked out, Boss Luo was no longer in the room. She walked to the table and placed a note under the cup that was filled with spirit liquid again. "I'm very happy to meet you today, Miss Long. Kelowna's Shinryu frowned and picked up the note expressionlessly. She wanted to tear it off, but she didn't. She just sighed, folded the note and stuffed it into her pocket. Then, she finished the third cup of elixir. She stayed in the room for a while before sneaking out. She couldn't just jump down from here. Her strength didn't allow her to do so. Miss, are you going to check out? Check out for what? Kelowna's Shinryu was startled. Yes, room 1907. Miss? The waiter stared at the sneaky lady with a strange expression. Back off. Kelowna's Shinryu gritted her teeth and spat. This profiteer, he took me to a hotel and didn't even pay for the room. Is he human? After a while. The total is 968 renminbi. The waiter said politely. Shouldn't it be 938 renminbi? Kelowna's Shinryu frowned and looked at the price list. 30 renminbi is for a box of Okamoto. The waiter said with a smile. One box is missing, Mississippi. If you have any questions, we can. No need. At this time, the true dragon of China hurriedly swept the bill. Then, he lowered his head, put on a windbreaker and sunglasses, and rushed out of the hotel door like he was escaping. He directly grabbed a taxi called by a customer. Drive. Suburb. I'll pay you 3 times the fare. Let's go. She left. In the conference hall of the summit meeting. Those are the things you need to pay attention to. If you have any questions, you can call these 3 numbers. Someone will answer your questions. You can also ask our colleagues later. Then goodbye. Yen Xiaoxi was soon escorted out of the conference hall by her subordinates, leaving only 2 of her subordinates behind to answer the questions that they had for them. In fact, there were many things listed in the booklet that they had distributed. Ren Xiling flipped through the booklet and felt that there was nothing to ask. Besides, looking at the 2 staff members who were surrounded by the media, Madame Ren suddenly lost the idea of joining in the fun. She actually thought of sneaking out during this chaotic time and intercepting Yen Xiaoxi for a surprise interview. However, she gave up the idea after thinking about it. This was not the same as before. Although Madame Ren was big-hearted, she was not brainless. Some small problems could be solved by relying on her connections, but some problems would implicate her connections. Boss, I'll go get the car, Old Q said quickly. Ren Xiling nodded and agreed. Lizzie suddenly said at this time, Sister Ren, I won't go back with you tonight. I saw on my WeChat that a fried chicken restaurant is open, but it's only open for 3 hours. I have to go there. Go ahead. Madame Ren nodded helplessly. This was a girl who could get up at 5 in the morning and run to the other side of the city to buy breakfast. It was normal for her to not go home to buy fried chicken. Thank you, Sister Ren. Then I'll go, bye. Seeing this girl quickly squeezing into the crowd and disappearing in the blink of an eye, Madame Ren couldn't help but shake her head. Don't come back so late. Okay. She only saw Lizzie's raised arm in the crowd. Shall I go back too? Ren Xiling lowered her head and muttered. Then the pressure of the day's work all disappeared. Because when she went out in the morning, her darling said that he would take his girlfriend home for dinner. Out of the door of the conference hall, Lizzie looked at the corridors that extended in all directions. She seemed to be in danger. She looked around and then walked into one of the corridors. At this time, 2 figures in black suits quickly appeared in the corridor and chased after her. They ran to the end of the corridor and turned the corner, but Lizzie had disappeared. Strange, she ran here. Where is she? Did she escape? No, the 2 men in black suits were shocked. They looked around nervously and pressed their palms to the place where the weapons were hidden at their waist. They shouted, "Come out! Don't be so nervous." They saw a head of long hair suddenly hanging down from their heads. They looked up and saw a pair with a smile on her face as she jumped down from the ceiling. Full marks. So, 2 big brothers from the administration. Why are you looking for me, a harmless little monster? Lizzie narrowed her eyes and asked with a smile. Someone wants to see you. One of the men in black said in a deep voice, Please cooperate and come with us. In the suburbs. In a place where one could feel the aura, Kelowna's Shinryu paid the fare and got off the car. Then she found a place where no one was and directly turned into a golden light and rushed into the sky. In just a moment, Kelowna's Shinryu had appeared in a mountain more than 100 kilometers away and then crashed into a pool in the valley. Bang! The water splashed everywhere. After a long time, the water calmed down and Kelowna's Shinryu's body slowly floated up from the bottom of the pool. The power of Kelowna's earth was constantly flowing into her limbs and bones. Long Shirua couldn't help but moan. She only felt that her spirit was floating and there was a lingering expression on her face. She suddenly woke up. F*CK, I'm drunk, ######## PS1. Thank you to Lemon Candy 2, for massaging the shoulders of the rich boss. PS2, 0 to 1, PS3, as usual. Chapter 1912. Li Zi was brought to a black nanny van. Apart from Yen Xiaoxi, there was another police detective who seemed to be in his 30s sitting in the back seat. However, Yen Xiaoxi did not look at her and instead looked out of the window. She could see the main entrance of the venue from her seat. Get in. After getting into the van, Li Zi had no choice but to carry her backpack and sit down beside the police detective, diagonally opposite Yen Xiaoxi. Let me introduce myself, the police detective said solemnly. I'm Fu Mingxian, a senior police detective from the Kelowna police station. I don't think I need to introduce you to Section Chief Yen. Li Zi nodded and unzipped her backpack. This action made Fu Mingxian's eyes look a little scary. He even grabbed Li Zi's wrist at lightning speed. Don't be nervous. Li Zi blinked and said, Don't be nervous, even if I have a weapon, I won't be able to carry it. Fu Mingxian finally let go of her with a frown on his face. However, his eyes were still fixed on her. Li Zi then took out 2 items from her backpack. One of them was a magnetic card that was the size of an ordinary bank card, while the other was an egg pudding. This is the residence permit that I applied for. It hasn't expired yet. You may check it. Li Zi handed the magnetic card to Fu Mingxian and tore open the packaging of the egg pudding before eating it with a spoon. Fu Mingxian then took out a machine and inserted the magnetic card into it. Soon, Li Zi's information was displayed on the screen. Section Chief. He then handed the information on the screen to Yen Xiaoxi. Yen Xiaoxi lowered her head to take a look before looking up at the nonchalant Li Zi. She then asked, Snow Lady, are you a monster from Japan? Do you want to eat this? Li Zi asked as she took out 2 more puddings from her backpack. We're asking you a question, Fu Mingxian exclaimed. With a small spoon in her mouth, Li Zi said pitifully, But, brothers, are you asking about my gender or something like that? Fu Mingxian frowned while Yen Xiaoxi gestured for him to keep quiet. At this moment, Yen Xiaoxi changed her sitting position and accepted the pear pudding. However, she did not eat it and instead said, According to the document, you applied for a vacation in Kelowna, but you have a job now, don't you? Li Zi smiled embarrassedly. It's just an excuse. Compared to being a stowaway, I applied for it according to the rules, and I applied for it for a long time. As for work, I need money to eat too. I can't possibly steal or rob. Yen Xiaoxi said calmly, There's still 2 months to go. I know. Li Zi nodded and said, I recently applied for long-term residence, but it seems to be a little difficult. It's a critical period now, Yen Xiaoxi said calmly. Li Zi answered softly, Why do you want to stay in Kelowna? Yen Xiaoxi asked all of a sudden. According to what I know, Japan is one of the few places that have benefited greatly from the revival of spiritual energy, probably because it's close to Kelowna. Snow girls are also very rare in Japan. I heard that they have been extinct for almost 200 years. If you go back to Japan, with their culture, you will immediately become a distinguished guest. Why do you want to stay in Shenzhou, in this place where magic is forbidden? The food here is delicious, Li Zi exclaimed in all seriousness. It's really delicious. I wanted to use a year to eat all the delicacies here and then go back. But even after a year, I still haven't finished eating all the delicacies here. There are new delicacies here every day. It's amazing. That was probably the most bizarre answer that Yan Xiaoxi and Fu Mingxian had ever heard since they started working. It was not that they had never heard of similar answers before. In fact, most of the answers given by the monsters were completely unfathomable. However, it was the first time that they had heard of such a thing. "Brothers, I'm really green and harmless," Lizzie said with a serious expression. At this time, Lizzie said seriously, "Look at me. Even if I buy food, I rely on the money I earn from my own work. I have never stolen anything. I am a law-abiding citizen." "If you're law-abiding, why did you appear on the media list for the summit meeting?" Fu Mingxian asked. "Don't tell me that you don't know what's going on either. It's our responsibility to supervise the security before and after the meeting." "In other words, it's because I'm a monster, right?" Lizzie suddenly put down the pitiful look on her face. "If a monster appears in this meeting, it means that it's unstable. It's a potential threat. On the other hand, some media outlets with ulterior motives can be protected, right? Don't change the concept." Fu Mingxian frowned. "It's also extreme. Then, please put aside your prejudice against the monsters." Lizzie shrugged her shoulders. "I'm here with the legal certificate that you've issued. Please respect the rules that you've set." "You've got a sharp tongue," Fu Mingxian sneered. "I've seen plenty of monsters like you. They're the type that won't give up until they see the coffin." "You, monsters like you?" Lizzie squinted. "How about this type? Listen." Fu Mingxian immediately sprung up and grabbed Lizzie's arm to bend it behind her back while pressing her neck down onto the chair. "Don't talk to me in such a tone. I'm the one who's asking questions now. You just have to answer. Why did you sneak into the meeting? What's your agenda? Is there someone behind you? What's your relationship with the Song family?" "I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just a small-time reporter," Lizzie said, finding it difficult to speak at this moment. "Also, does this count as using violence?" "You're still being stubborn," Fu Mingxian sneered. "Perhaps you haven't been interrogated by the authorities." Yan Xiaoxi watched on expressionlessly. In his opinion, this was not considered overboard. They did not have much patience during critical times. However, at this moment, there was a commotion outside the car, interrupting Yan Xiaoxi's train of thought. He subconsciously looked outside and at the same time, looked at the chauffeur in front with a frown. "What happened?" The chauffeur said. "A woman rushed over and said that she was looking for someone. Our people were stopping her and there was a small conflict." "A woman?" Yan Xiaoxi asked with a frown. At this moment, Lizzie was still being pressed down by Fu Mingxian. After hearing this, she seemed to have thought of something. She looked up, seemingly worried about something. "Could it be, Lizzie? Are you in there?" "Lizzie, I saw you. You were being escorted upstairs by two people." "Lizzie." She had already heard Ren Xiling yelling. "What are you guys doing? Let go." "So what if you're from the authorities? I saw you guys bringing my friend upstairs with my own eyes. What are you guys doing to her? Let go of me. Let go." "Miss, we're in the middle of an office. Please leave." "No, I won't leave if I don't see my friend. I want to know if she's safe. I'm telling you, she's not only my friend, but she's also my employee. I have the responsibility to protect her. If you're in the middle of an office, why can't I see you?" "Ma'am, please cooperate. If your friend is fine, we won't hurt her." "What could be wrong with her? If she is, would you hurt her?" "Ma'am, please calm down." At this moment, Fu Mingxian pushed the door open and alighted from the nanny van. He adjusted his clothes and stared at the woman who was creating a scene in front of the car with a frown. He remembered this woman, the one who was sitting in the first row of the interview area and was forcibly inserted into the media by Song Haoran. At this moment, Renziling was still in a standoff with a few agents from the authorities. Fu Mingxian walked towards her with a straight face. I'm not going to ask what's going on. Fu Mingxian said indifferently, please leave now. We're working in the authorities. We don't need to explain to anyone. I've already politely asked you to leave. Please leave. Auntie Ren, who was used to seeing the wind and waves of people, actually felt flustered when she was stared at by this man in his 30s. She had interviewed a lot of extremely evil murderers. It was this kind of murderous gaze that was very frightening. What do you want to do to Lizzie? Ren Xiling stubbornly greeted him. She's my good friend. Good friend? Fu Mingxian chuckled. It seems that you don't know who your so-called good friend is. Well, I won't talk to you anymore. We need to take your good friend away to cooperate with the investigation. That's it, please leave. Without waiting for Ren Xiling's response, Fu Mingxian waved his hand and said indifferently, take her away. Just be polite. As he said, he took out a small stick from his clothes and handed it to a subordinate beside him. The subordinate immediately understood what Fu Mingxian meant. This was a method used to quickly deal with ordinary people without leaving any trouble, to take them away and erase their short-term memory. Seeing the agents walking towards her, Ren Xiling frowned. What do you want to do? This is a public place. I didn't break the law. Stop. At this time, Yan Xiaoxi suddenly opened the door and walked out. They obeyed Fu Mingxian, but obviously they obeyed Yan Xiaoxi more. Hearing her words, they stopped. Yan Xiaoxi said indifferently, your friend is fine, take her away. Lizzie touched her neck at this time, looking a little pale. She walked out of the car in bewilderment, and then quickly ran back to Ren Xiling. Seeing this, Ren Xiling instinctively reached out to protect Lizzie behind her. Lizzie, don't be afraid, I'm here. Sister Ren, I'm fine, don't worry. Lizzie quickly said at this time. They just asked me a few questions. If there's anything, let's talk about it after we leave. Ren Xiling looked at Lizzie in bewilderment, only to see that Lizzie's eyes were no longer as jovial as before. You guys go. At this time, Yan Xiaoxi said indifferently, I'm sorry to have frightened you two today. This is the fault of the agency. It's okay now. We'll compensate your friend for the mental damage. Section Chief? Fu Mingxian came to Yan Xiaoxi's side in disbelief. Go back. Yan Xiaoxi ignored her and directly got into the car. Seeing this, Fu Mingxian had no choice but to shake her head. She then waved her hand and called her men back, after which the car drove out and left. Really left like this? Ren Xiling looked at this scene with a little surprise, then slowly sighed. At this time, Lizzie opened her eyes wide and looked at Ren Xiling, saying, Sister Ren, how did you know I was in the car, still? Ren Xiling said angrily, I just happened to bump into you. When I came out, I saw you being escorted into the car by two guys in black, so I took a look with my camera out of curiosity. As a result, I saw you being held down by those guys, so I hurried over. Fortunately, you're fine. By the way, why did these people from the agency catch you? They said I'm a monster. Lizzie blinked and said at this time, I said I wanted to destroy the world, so they came to catch me. Auntie Ren was stunned, then raised her hand and knocked Lizzie's head with her fist. Speak human language. Lizzie stuck out her tongue in pain. It's because of this necklace. They seem to have a special instrument that can detect the special energy of my necklace, so they came to me to ask about it. Necklace? Auntie Ren looked at the necklace on Lizzie's neck dubiously. Obviously, compared to Lizzie being a monster who wanted to destroy the world, this answer was more credible. After all, she also saw that, in the venue, some people from the agency broke the cameras of all the media. What's wrong with this necklace? Lizzie shook her head and said, I don't know, this was left by my ancestors. They said they wanted to take it back for research, but I didn't agree. Maybe there was some conflict because of this. But it's okay now. You said it's okay? They held you down. If I came a little later, I don't know what would happen. Ren Xiling said angrily, I don't know if they will come to trouble you again later. It shouldn't be. Lizzie smiled and said, I'm just a small citizen. Besides, why would Section Chief Yen always hold on to a small person like me? Sister Ren, let's go back first. Okay. Ren Xiling nodded and immediately stammered, Lizzie, can you help me up? My legs are weak. Lizzie couldn't help but smile bitterly. She probably didn't know how terrifying the organization she was facing was. But even if she knew, it probably wouldn't change anything, right? There were so many delicacies here that she couldn't finish them in a year. But there was something else here. If I were a monster, would you still do it without hesitation? Humans. Section Chief, why were you so sudden just now? In the car, Fu Mingxian frowned and looked at the silent Yen Xiaoxi in bewilderment. At this moment, Yen Xiaoxi slowly sighed and looked at her subordinate with difficulty. Have you seen the real? Seen the real what? Fu Mingxian immediately frowned again, only to discover that the section chief's collar was wet. What exactly happened in the car when he alighted just now? However, Yen Xiaoxi didn't continue speaking and instead looked distracted, as if she couldn't hear anything at all. Fu Mingxian had no choice but to remain silent. Humans and demons coexist. Seems like this woman outside doesn't know your identity yet. Yen Xiaoxi looked away and looked at Lizzie. After Fu Mingxian alighted from the car, Lizzie was no longer restrained. Logically speaking, she should be able to sit up normally. However, Yen Xiaoxi felt that something was amiss. At this moment, not only did Lizzie not sit up properly, she was still in the same position as before. Yen Xiaoxi got a great shock and subconsciously looked out of the window. The entire world seemed to have come to a standstill at this moment. He suddenly felt that someone was sitting beside him. Hello, Section Chief Yen. The moment Yen Xiaoxi turned around, she saw a pair of muddled eyes. Hashtag PS 1/1. Chapter 1913. He was not lost. However, he felt as if his spirit had been pulled into a black hole and pierced through thousands of times before being spat out. He felt as if he had been given a new lease of life. Cold sweat had already drenched Yen Xiaoxi's shirt when he came back to his senses. His shirt was stuck to his skin, and he felt as if he had been running outside for hours on a hot day. The city's restrictive spell was still in effect. Yen Xiaoxi could clearly feel that he could not activate the true power in his body. Yes, the city's restrictive spell was still in effect. How did the other party appear in front of him without him noticing? And it was as if the time around him had been frozen by the people who were standing still. Who are you? Yen Xiaoxi asked with great difficulty. Why can you, Section Chief Yen, haven't you, the administration, been looking for the reason behind the city's restrictive spell? I'm the one who imprisoned this city. All of a sudden, Yen Xiaoxi's mind was in turmoil. I'm the one who imprisoned this city. That sentence alone was enough to make Yen Xiaoxi feel an unprecedented sense of fear. Imprisonment was not simply about imprisoning someone, but rather it was about using all the supernatural powers in the city. Even if it was his master, the fire cloud evil god, or the old fart of the demon race, even if it was the invincible true dragon of the divine land, none of them could use the slightest bit of extraordinary power in this forbidden city. It was not that they did not think that this was not a natural phenomenon and that there must be something behind it. However, to make this happen, could it be that the thing behind it was more terrifying than the invincible Kelowna Shinryu? It was like a dead end. They were in awe of the power of Kelowna Shinryu and the power of Kelowna Shinryu. However, when something appeared that could break the myth of Kelowna Shinryu, why did you appear? Yen Xiaoxi seemed to have been enlightened all of a sudden. Just like a person on the brink of death, she tried her best to leave something behind. She blurted out all the questions that she could think of and wanted to ask. Who are you? Why are you doing this? What is your purpose? You? Her muddled eyes gradually became clear again. Boss Luo, who was sitting beside Yen Xiaoxi, glanced at Li Zi, who was in a peculiar posture, and waved her away. Li Zi's body began to straighten up little by little, and she sat properly. "Are you here for her?" Yan Xiaoxi exclaimed, having sensed something. "I'm not here for anyone on this bus," Boss Luo said calmly. "I just thought that instead of letting you guess, it would be better to meet and tell you the purpose of imprisoning this city. After all, speculations without any direction will generally give birth to many strange ideas. Things like conspiracy theories are not uncommon." What purpose?" Boss Luo said calmly. "I have a friend that I respect. She was born for this city. Even when she was about to leave, she didn't want this city to be destroyed, even if she was plotted against behind the scenes. The people here, the demons here, and everything here are all things that she cares about. This is a kind of great love. The reason why the city is forbidden is to prevent too many supernatural events from happening here." "Supernatural events are happening all over the world," Yan Xiaoxi said solemnly. However, she felt unprecedentedly solemn. She didn't know what kind of terrifying thing she was facing at this moment. Because of the unknown, she was unusually anxious, cautious, and hesitant. Something that surpassed Kelowna and Shinryu's forbidden? "I don't care about other places," Boss Luo said calmly. "At least for now, there's no reason for me to care. I've said before that this city is forbidden because of this friend." It gave Yan Xiaoxi a shock, as if a nuclear bomb had exploded. Don't care about other places for now, there's no reason to care. This kind of forbidden can spread all over the world? Yan Xiaoxi and the others blurted out. "This depends on whether there's someone, and whether there's enough reward to ask me to do this." Boss Luo smiled slightly and said, "Of course, in the end it depends on whether I'm willing to do this. I'm mostly acting according to my mood now." If someone had said the same thing to Yan Xiaoxi before this, he would have asked that person to leave without hesitation. But now, no matter what it said, it was a terrifying creature that could make people believe it instinctively. Yan Xiaoxi could no longer equate it with a human or a demon. The only thing he could think of was the most appropriate, most fitting, and only one possibility: God. At least similar to God. Supernatural beings had existed since ancient times. There were many legends in myths and legends that could be followed even today. Kelowna and Shinryu were living examples. The founder of the Xianyuan Palace was the legendary Yellow Emperor. Then, God, although the administration was only established in recent times, the existence of ancient gods, and whether they still existed like Kelowna and Shinryu. However, they were all highly confidential. Even if they were to investigate, even Yan Xiaoxi couldn't come into contact with them. However, since ancient times, countless emperors in China had been searching for gods and immortals. This was an undeniable fact. "I think my appearance may have caused you some trouble," Boss Luo said calmly. "However, these troubles are necessary because I hope that Section Chief Yen can help me pass a message to the administration. The purpose of the forbidden spell in this city is to maintain peace and not to create such a special environment. It's not for anyone. In fact, I think the administration should know better about the ecology of this city." The ecology of the city. Yan Xiaoxi couldn't help but fall into deep thought. It was obviously inappropriate to talk about the ecology of the city purely on the economic aspect under such circumstances. It was an ecological enclosure between humans and demons. The administration had indeed done some research on this before. Due to the fact that this city was basically Kelowna and Shinryu's private land, it was the city with the highest number of registered demons in human society. At the same time, it was also the city with the lowest number of demons. There were only 2 people from the administration and a small office here. At the thought of this, Yan Xiaoxi couldn't help but think about a question. If Yan Xiaoxi took a deep breath. If this ecology is destroyed, what will happen? "I'm trying my best to fulfill the promise I made to that friend," Boss Luo said expressionlessly. "Of course, this promise isn't permanent, But before the end of the time limit, at least I won't just let it go after imprisoning it. For example, I can use some direct methods to get rid of some troubles once and for all. Direct methods? Yen Xiaoxi couldn't help but gulp. Boss Luo thought for a while and said, "Let me give an example. I'll just do a simple demonstration. Look like this." He snapped his fingers. Yen Xiaoxi's eyes widened instantly as if he had seen a ghost. He stared straight ahead in disbelief. His master, the peerless national scholar of the administration, Fire Cloud Evil God, appeared, out of thin air in the back seat of the nanny van, sitting right in front of him. At this moment, Fire Cloud Evil God was completely motionless. He was holding a newspaper with both hands, wearing a small white singlet and large underpants. The underpants had already retracted to his legs. Obviously, Fire Cloud Evil God was squatting in the toilet. "What are you trying to do?" Yen Xiaoxi was shocked, but he was even more terrified. He was now unable to move. For example, turn this consultant into an ordinary person. Boss Luo said calmly, or, a more direct method is possible. Illusion, this must be an illusion. Perhaps at this very moment, or perhaps from the moment the other party appeared, he had already been affected by an illusion. This was already unrealistic, something that shouldn't be possible. Yen Xiaoxi took a deep breath. After confirming that this wasn't real, he became much calmer. Boss Luo didn't say anything. He just waved his hand again, and Fire Cloud Evil God, who was holding the newspaper, disappeared in front of Yen Xiaoxi again. "You'll believe it," Boss Luo said softly. "Then, I'm very happy to meet you this time, Section Chief Yen." Yen Xiaoxi was about to say something, but Boss Luo had already disappeared. Yen Xiaoxi frowned and subconsciously heaved a sigh of relief. It wasn't an easy task to face a guy who could still use extraordinary power under the prohibition spell. Yen Xiaoxi shook his head. Although he still didn't know what the other party's intention was, he should consider whether there was a special method that could allow people to use extraordinary power under the prohibition spell. If there was such a method, then the prohibition spell in this city would lose its meaning. Wait. Lizzie hadn't recovered, she was still motionless. Outside, Yen Xiaoxi rushed out of the car. The world outside the car, the people outside the car, everything still hadn't recovered. The whole world seemed to have stopped, as if he was the only one left in the world. This was a completely gray world. "Impossible! This is impossible! This is impossible!" He patted Fu Mingxian, whose mouth was still open, but there was no reaction. He tried to push the body of an agent from the administration, but he couldn't move him even after using all his strength. He pushed, moved, and bumped into them one by one. Each of them seemed to have grown roots and were firmly connected to the ground. "This is impossible! This is impossible!" He went to pick up a bottle of water, but he couldn't pick it up at all. After a long, long time, he walked through the streets and alleys in a daze. He was thirsty and only wanted to drink some water. However, even the sewage in the sewer was as hard as diamond. He used his fist. He could only use his fist to smash it, because even if it was a grain of sand, he couldn't move it. However, his fist couldn't break any solidified water source. This can't be, with the last bit of hope in his heart, he ran out of the city and ran to the suburbs. From day to night, from night to day, he couldn't find anything that could be moved. His eyes were already bloodshot and exhausted. He could feel how disheveled he was. However, he couldn't see himself in the mirror at all. This can't be, after a long time. He seemed to have used up the last bit of energy in his life and finally returned to the banquet venue, to the nanny van. Time seemed to have lost its meaning and nothing changed. Yen Xiaoxi was like a fallen leaf that had returned to its root. At last, he curled up in the same spot where he had been sitting at the beginning. 1 day, 2 days, perhaps 8 or 10 days had already passed. He already couldn't remember. The physique of a martial artist allowed him to last a little longer than a normal person under extremely frightening circumstances, but not by much. His mental state seemed to have reached its limit. "This is real," Yan Xiaoxi murmured. Yan Xiaoxi murmured and looked down, only to see that the pudding that Li Zi had bought for him had landed below the seat. Yan Xiaoxi subconsciously reached out to touch the pudding, and the pudding moved the instant his fingers touched it. It only moved a little. Yan Xiaoxi seemed to have lost his mind. He immediately pounced on the pudding and scooped it up with his trembling hands, as if he were picking up the source of life from the depths of the desert. His face was pale and weathered, and his lips were chapped. Yan Xiaoxi immediately tore open the packaging of the pudding and stuck his tongue out timidly to lick the dreamy sweetness. "It's real." Upon sensing the explosion of sweetness on his taste buds, the dignified chief of the Kelowna Administrative Bureau dug into the pudding with his fingers like a starving refugee. Are you all right?" All of a sudden, Yan Xiaoxi shuddered and turned his neck stiffly, only to see that Li Zi was staring at him in shock. "I admit that the pudding I bought is delicious, but you don't need it. It's real." He looked out of the window. "What are you guys trying to do to Li Zi? I'm warning you, don't act recklessly." Outside the car, the world gradually regained its color because of this voice. Chief? Yes?" Fu Mingxian stared at Yan Xiaoxi in astonishment. Ever since they left the conference hall, Yan Xiaoxi had been keeping quiet and closing his eyes to get some rest. Yan Xiaoxi was grabbing his wrist forcefully. "Chief, what's wrong?" Yan Xiaoxi glared at Fu Mingxian for a long while before calming down. He slowly let go of Fu Mingxian, taking a long time to do so. "Chief, you had a nightmare?" Fu Mingxian asked in bewilderment while rubbing his wrist. "Yeah." Yan Xiaoxi wiped his face and sighed. "I had a long nightmare that I don't want to have again." "All right." Fu Mingxian nodded and said, "We've arrived at the hotel. We still have 3 more meetings to attend. Why don't we postpone them to tonight? You haven't been resting well for the past few days." "No." Yan Xiaoxi took a deep breath and said, "I've already stopped for long enough." Fu Mingxian frowned in bewilderment. Yan Xiaoxi ignored him and alighted from the car. Just as she was about to leave, she suddenly turned around and said, "Inform everyone to be as polite and courteous as possible. Don't get into unnecessary conflicts with the demons at all." Yes. He was frightened by the look in Yan Xiaoxi's eyes. His eyes were bloodshot like a wild beast. Chief must be too tired. End of chapter. Chapter 1914. After returning to the hotel, Yan Xiaoxi decided to postpone the meetings that he was supposed to attend. He went to look for his master, Fire Cloud Evil God. Most of the time, Fire Cloud Evil God did not dress up like an expert. He was more down to earth. Like now. He was wearing a white singlet, baggy pants, slippers, and ankle-length shoes. Yan Xiaoxi did not feel that Fire Cloud Evil God was going to collapse in his heart because he was used to seeing his master like this since he was young. Fire Cloud Evil God was originally a farmer. He was an honest farmer in the mountains. He didn't have a wife. It was said that his family was poor, so he gave his wife to his elder brother. Later, because of some opportunities, he stepped onto the path of a martial artist. "Xiaoxi? Why are you here?" Fire Cloud Evil God frowned. He put down the newspaper and looked at Yan Xiaoxi in confusion. "You don't look well. You seem to have lost a lot of energy. What happened?" He knew that he could not hide his poor complexion. He did not intend to hide it either. Yan Xiaoxi sat down beside Fire Cloud Evil God. He did not say anything and just sat there quietly. Fire Cloud Evil God frowned and relaxed, then frowned again. "I feel like I haven't seen Master in a long time." Yan Xiaoxi finally spoke. "Didn't you just see him this morning?" Fire Cloud Evil God was even more confused. He already knew that his disciple had encountered a problem, and it was not an ordinary problem. However, as a master, he knew his disciple's temperament. If Yen Xiaoxi did not take the initiative to talk about it, it meant that he really did not intend to tell anyone. He was not at his wits' end yet. Yes, this morning. Yen Xiaoxi smiled with a complicated expression. Feelings are a wonderful thing. Sometimes you will feel that time is extremely long. Sometimes when you look back, it is just a moment. Fire Cloud Evil God was brewing tea. It was kung fu tea. However, he liked to drink from the small teapot. Smack, smack. Fire Cloud Evil God smiled and said, "It's like taking a dump. When it's clear, it's fast. When it's blocked, it's uncomfortable. I just took a dump. It feels like I've been taking a dump for 8 to 10 days. Yen Xiaoxi looked at the Fire Cloud Evil God abruptly and asked, "Master, you can feel it?" "Feel what?" Fire Cloud Evil God was startled and subconsciously said, "I just pooped." "You make it sound like 10 days have passed." "That's just a metaphor." Fire Cloud Evil God shook his head. "It's just a feeling. In fact, I haven't been there for very long, just a little more than 10 minutes. Your master's stomach is still very good." Yen Xiaoxi could not help but burst into laughter. Her master probably did not know that she felt as if she had been separated from him for a lifetime. The traces he had left behind in the halted gray world only existed in this faintly discernible feeling of his master. No one knew. This was a kind of great horror. Just thinking about it slightly made him feel as if he had fallen into an ice cellar, and his whole body went cold. He didn't want to experience it again. "Master, I'd like to ask you a question." Yen Xiaoxi took a deep breath and asked solemnly. "Ask away." Fire Cloud Evil God looked up. Yen Xiaoxi asked seriously, "In this world of ours, is there an existence stronger than the Kelowna Shinryu?" Fire Cloud Evil God could not help but frown. He did not answer immediately and only sipped his tea. After a while, he slowly said, "Why do you ask this question?" "Because I'm curious." Yen Xiaoxi thought and said, "Because of the forbidden spell in this city, even the Kelowna Shinryu is not spared." "Maybe." Fire Cloud Evil God looked at Yen Xiaoxi seriously for a while, then shook his head and said, "But who exactly, what kind of person, what kind of background, I don't know. I can't tell you too much." "Maybe?" Yen Xiaoxi asked in surprise, "Why?" "It's just a feeling." Fire Cloud Evil God shook his head. "I once met a guy. I don't know his background, everything behind him. We fought once. I didn't win against him, and he didn't win against me. That fight was just a test between the two sides. But I can feel that the other party is holding back much more than me. He seems to be under some kind of restriction, so he can't use his full strength here." Yen Xiaoxi shook his head and said, "Master, you can't beat the Kelowna Shinryu either. How can you compare?" Fire Cloud Evil God could not help but roll his eyes. "Whoever can beat the Long Shirua, who hangs thousands of power banks on her body every day, I'll live stream myself eating this teapot." "Maybe, is that so?" Yen Xiaoxi pondered. But Fire Cloud Evil God looked at him and saw that he seemed to be in better spirit. "I don't know why you ask me these questions. I hope my answer can help you. If you're confused because of a problem in your martial arts practice, then I'll be very happy. This means that you're finally able to put more effort into the path of martial arts." Yen Xiaoxi shook his head and seemed to be in better spirits. "Master, this person you're talking about, you really don't know his background? There was a period of time when I was looking for this guy all over the world." Fire Cloud Evil God thought for a moment and said, "Later on, I thought that he might be a hermit who hasn't appeared in the world. So, I challenged everyone in the name of a challenge, regardless of whether they were from the Taoist sects or the demon clan. I almost went through the entire Taoist and demon realm, but I still couldn't find this mysterious person. Later on, I beat up too many people and Taoist Baijie couldn't sit still anymore. He called Long Shirua over and the two of them shamelessly teamed up to bully me. But that mysterious person really didn't appear again, as if it was just a dream." Yen Xiaoxi smiled bitterly. How should he put it? He made the incident that had stirred up a storm in Kelowna many years ago sound like a child playing house. His temperament, as the saying went, the more he lived, the more real he became. He no longer cared about the rules and regulations of the world. But there was no doubt that the master in front of him did have the ability to make both the Taoist and demon realms tremble. Both the Taoist and demon realms avoided the fire cloud evil god. It was probably comparable to the name of the eastern evil dragon in Kelowna Shinryu in the inhuman realm. But it was precisely such a powerful and unparalleled scholar. At that time, Yen Xiaoxi subconsciously recalled the scene when Boss Luo waved his hand to summon the fire cloud evil god and sent him away. Yen Xiaoxi still had a question that he couldn't figure out. If the mysterious master who sealed the city wanted to send a message that he didn't want anyone to destroy the city and didn't want anyone to guess the truth behind the seal, why did he only look for him? Wouldn't it be better to look for the fire cloud evil god directly, or look for someone with more power in the administration? However, the one who looked for him was Section Chief Yen. Although this section chief wasn't small, he wasn't big either. What could he do? Instead of saying that it was to explain something, Yen Xiaoxi felt that it was more like some kind of punishment, the time when he was imprisoned in the frozen world. Was this Taoist magic? Sorcery, or some kind of more unknown power, like the great magical power of the gods in the myths? With his knowledge, he couldn't analyze all of this. In front of him was a bottomless sea. Section Chief Yen finally sighed deeply. He decided not to think about this question anymore. It was useless to think about it. In front of the power that could freeze time, what could he do even if he thought about it? He couldn't do anything. He could only accept it passively, that was all. I still have a few meetings. Yen Xiaoxi took a deep breath. Master, I won't accompany you. But what should be done still had to be done. I'm accompanying you, okay? The fire cloud evil god looked at Yen Xiaoxi's swift departure and couldn't help but shake his head. Only when this disciple left did the fire cloud evil god stand up. He planned to go and take a dump again. Speaking of which, what was the name of that guy? Sitting on the toilet lid, the fire cloud evil god began to think hard. His dusty memories gradually opened up. Wearing a red robe, as beautiful as a woman. I've never seen such a style. Long Yang? Long Yang? I can't remember. In the sky, there was a flight coming from Europe. This was a completely chartered plane, but the flight attendants on the plane didn't know which company chartered the plane. The passengers were all strange people. They were either discussing some topics about witchcraft, or some strange formulas that looked like equations, or some topics about gods and ghosts. Although the flight attendants felt strange, they weren't too surprised. Recently, the whole world was talking about supernatural events, and they were already used to it. Do you need a drink? A flight attendant came to the first-class cabin and politely asked a gentleman with very rosy skin. The color of this skin looked like it was boiling hot. No, thank you. We don't need service here. You can go back and rest. Okay. The flight attendant's heart skipped a beat, looked at the passengers in the first-class cabin, and then quickly left. What a terrifying gaze, it seemed like it could spit out flames. After the flight attendant left, a beautiful woman with a plump figure sitting next to the ruddy-skinned man said expressionlessly, I'm just doing my job. Is there a need to scare people like this, Qi Yen? Do I look like the kind of person who would casually hit on a beautiful flight attendant? The rosy-skinned man snorted at this time, You're slandering my character. TSK. You have a strong desire to survive. I clearly saw you staring at the little girl's butt. Pretty? With that, the beautiful woman pinched Red Flame's ear. Say it. Are you thinking of something bad? The seats gradually became noisy. It was the two Tower Masters of the Magician Association. The Red Flame Tower Master and the Ice Tower Master husband and wife. As for the one sitting behind the two Tower Masters, it was a girl who looked quite helpless at this time. Red Flame Tower Master, Ice Tower Master, don't quarrel. Don't quarrel. The little girl could only stand up and try to persuade, but it seemed to have no effect. She could only look at the other companion next to her for help, Zhong Luoyue, who had been accompanying her. Seeing this, Zhong Luoyue had to helplessly smile. In fact, similar things had happened several times on the road. Don't worry. The two pagoda masters are both senior experts with status and experience. Zhong Luoyue deliberately raised her voice. How can they make trouble like children and do things that harm our magician association? I think the two tower masters are just trying to liven up the atmosphere. Am I right, Red Flame Tower Master, Ice Tower Master? The front was silent for a moment. The little girl suddenly looked at Zhong Luoyue with admiration. The latter had to helplessly pat the little girl's head and whisper softly, "Are you hungry, why Lisabeth?" "I'm okay," the little girl said softly. Zhong Luoyue took out a thermos bottle from her portable luggage and opened it. "I heard that all supernatural powers will be restrained in the city where the conference is held. I don't know if it will affect vampires. We're almost there, eat something first just in case." "Okay." The little girl nodded and then sighed. "It's so good to have you by my side. If you're not by my side, I don't know what to do. Things like emotional investment will only get deeper and deeper." Zhong Luoyue gently rubbed the little girl's hair and showed a beautiful smile. She immediately looked outside the plane. It was evening, but the sun was still high up in the sky. Zhong Luoyue felt sleepy at this time. She didn't expect that she would actually set foot on Kelowna again so soon. Because she was turned into a vampire, she had to choose to leave her family and the place she grew up in. However, in this short period of time, her life had undergone earth-shattering changes. This time, she came to participate in the International Supernatural Summit Conference. The Magician Association was an ancient organization in the European continent. It didn't represent any country, but it represented itself. This time, the participants were the two Tower Masters, Crimson Flame and Frost. As for Lisabeth, she was ordered by the first Tower Master, the Radiance Tower Master, to follow the two Tower Masters to participate in the conference. It was probably for the purpose of training. The sun was still too bright, so Zhong Luoyue had to close her eyes. After a short nap, she should be able to land. Some of the representatives had arrived early, but there were also some who had yet to appear. In general, regardless of whether they were invited or came of their own accord, this city's supernatural powers were to the extent that they could casually meet on the streets. If they were not under the supervision of the authority and had to stay on the streets, they could freely walk on the street. At night, after the conference, Section Chief Yen, who had just sat down in his lounge, suddenly received a phone call. He could not help but look solemn. "Okay, I understand. I'll go and receive them personally." Section Chief Yen quickly arranged for a car to leave. He did not go to the airport or the train station. Instead, he went to a deserted beach by the river. A team of agents from the authority alighted from the car and stood in a row behind Yen Xiaoxi. Their gazes were solemn as they stared at the river in front of them. At this moment, there was a sudden flash of light in the river. Then, it seemed like a huge object was about to emerge from the water. Splash! The river was surging. At this moment, what appeared in front of Yen Xiaoxi and the others was a strange-looking submarine without any country's logo. It did not look like an existing model either. The river parted from where the submarine appeared. A group of soldiers in strange armor walked out slowly from the parted waterway. At this moment, the soldiers were clustered around a young man and woman in silver robes. Yen Xiaoxi composed himself and quickly walked forward. "Hello, I'm Yen Xiaoxi. This time, I'm in charge of receiving the representatives from your country." The young man in the lead smiled shyly at this moment, as if he suddenly thought of something. He reached out his hand and said, "This seems to be the etiquette of the people on the ground," shaking hands. "Hello, Mr. Yen Xiaoxi. I'm Riaz, the first prince of Underwater City. This is Lyoga, my fiancée." This time, we're here on the orders of the Emperor of Underwater City to participate in the summit meeting of the humans on the ground. We're looking forward to meeting you. Chapter 1915. He seemed to be curious about everything. Ever since he got on the car, he had been looking around. The first prince from the underwater city really looked like a young man. Yan Xiaoxi noticed the childishness on Prince Riaz's face. However, the girl who was the first prince's fiancée gave Yan Xiaoxi a vicious feeling at first glance. The underwater city. An ancient capital that suddenly emerged from the deep sea. A deep-sea city that had a longer history than the humans on the surface. Other than that, humans could no longer find out more about the underwater city or other countries. This was because Kelowna was the first country that the underwater city came into contact with. As for why the prince of the underwater city appeared here, it had to start from a week ago. A week ago, on the northern coastline of China, the Coastal Defense Force on alert detected a super-large submarine of unknown origin. The appearance of the submarine instantly caused the military to be on high alert. Until this super-large submarine stated its purpose of coming, to establish diplomatic relations. It seemed that due to the revival of spiritual energy, various legends around the world were gradually reviving. Humans had gradually gotten used to these legendary figures in their daily lives. Under such a mainstream trend, even if there was another city in the deep sea, it did not seem to be a big deal. Only the children in a few decades would be troubled. This stack was all the major events that happened in the first year of the revival of spiritual energy, such as questions, key points, and so on. That's right, the first year of the revival of spiritual energy. It was one of the contents of this extraordinary summit meeting. Prince Riaz, is this your first time coming to the surface? Yan Xiaoxi asked in a neither servile nor overbearing manner. Even though Prince Riaz's identity was slightly more special than the envoys of those countries. After all, not only was he the representative of a transcendent force, but he was also the prince of the underwater city and the future Yellow Emperor of the underwater city. This dual identity also meant that Prince Riaz's safety was very important. Due to the short contact, the agency did not know the details of the underwater city. However, a city that could survive in the deep sea for countless years naturally possessed extraordinary technology. Indeed, it's my first time coming to the surface. Prince Riaz nodded. I've only seen it in the museum before, but it didn't look like this. The people on the surface have really developed a great civilization. At this moment, Yan Xiaoxi was secretly observing the prince's fiancée. She realized that the girl named Lyoga seemed to be distracted and was not paying attention to the conversation. I'm also very fond of the culture of Underwater City. Yan Xiaoxi smiled and said politely, I believe that it must be a highly advanced civilization that can make people gasp in amazement. There's one thing I'm curious about. The language of Underwater City seems to be. Oh, it's because of this collar, Prince Riaz said with a smile. It can help us communicate with you. Without it, I'm afraid we wouldn't be able to communicate effectively even with hand signals. Is this a technological product of the underwater city? Yan Xiaoxi asked tentatively. Sort of. Riaz smiled noncommittally. In short, there won't be many of these collars, but it's enough. I've read from the information submitted by your country that your country seems to be using a technology called mystic energy. I've always been curious about this technology, Yan Xiaoxi said solemnly. It's actually a kind of energy. Riaz thought for a while and said, It's similar to your electricity and oil. I remember that our first batch of emissaries should have sent you some gifts, some of which are samples of the mystic energy technology. I'm not in charge of technical research. Yan Xiaoxi shook her head. The guy who's currently researching the samples is keeping a tight lid on it. I can understand the excitement of seeing different new technologies. Riaz smiled and said, I used to be so engrossed in some new technologies that I would forget to eat and sleep and hide in the studio alone. Prince Riaz suddenly stopped talking. Yen Xiaoxi saw Liuga's little action. The prince's fiancée was secretly pinching his waist. It's probably very painful. Riaz's expression was no longer as natural. Section Chief Yen, how long will it take to reach the place where we're staying? Liuga asked calmly. Our prince has rushed all the way here and is very tired. We'll be there soon. I was wrong. It's rare for me to come to the land. I was too excited. In the residence specially arranged by the administration, the prince of the underwater city was sitting in front of Liuga and glancing at her flat belly from time to time. There was a little life inside. However, the body structure of the Siren clan was more complicated. It was said that the pregnancy time varied from person to person, with the longest being over 30 years. What are you looking at? Liuga humphed coldly. Are you still thinking of sleeping with me? No, I didn't mean that. The prince of the underwater city panicked and hurriedly waved his hand. Then, he muttered, You're the one who slept with me first, Liuga humphed softly. Remember, I'm your fiancé. It's just for the convenience of our actions on the ground. It doesn't mean anything. Riaz immediately smiled bitterly. Actions on the ground. The underwater city had just suffered a major disaster, and the entire city was still being rebuilt. It was far from being as strong as before. Taking the risk to contact the humans on the ground was a helpless move. Because the final battle between the underwater city and Asin had caused too much of a commotion, during the reconstruction period after the disaster, the underwater city had discovered several groups of people from different forces on the ground. The barrier of the underwater city still needed a long time to be repaired. During this time, the underwater city couldn't be hidden. Moreover, since Louis XXXIX, there were already examples of people secretly contacting the Black Order on the ground. It was better to take this opportunity to proactively announce the existence of the underwater city to the humans on the ground and establish a good diplomatic relationship. It might not be useful, but it might not be useless either. This idea was proposed by Riaz. Currently, because Louis XXXIX was in a deep sleep, the real ruler of the underwater city was Liuga. However, during the reconstruction period, Liuga announced to the people that Riaz was the appointed successor of Louis XXXIX. One was a witch with real power, and the other was the prince with the highest status and name. Then, the witch unexpectedly listened to the prince's proposal. Thus, there was this trip to the kingdom on the ground. Why did you agree to my proposal? Riaz still had doubts in his heart. The girl Liuga calmly said, It's not because of you. It's just because Louis has always wanted to walk on the ground openly. This is indeed a good opportunity. I just want to fulfill Louis's wish. Do you really think that the suggestion of a political newbie is very good? Riaz smiled embarrassedly. Liuga stretched out her hand at this time. After a while, she frowned and said, This city, just like the rumors, can't use supernatural power. Blue blood power. Me too. Riaz nodded. My blue blood power has also completely quieted down. It didn't disappear, but it's like it's completely asleep. But magic equipment can still be used. At least we won't be completely passive. The girl, Liuga, skillfully took out a dagger. The dagger in her hand danced like a butterfly, emitting a faint blue light. Riaz was very scared of Liuga's appearance when she held the dagger. He couldn't help but swallow his saliva. What do you want to do? Liuga sneered. Her hand shook, and the dagger directly pierced the table, right in front of Riaz. I'm going to take a shower. Don't peek. Whose? Riaz shook his head. After Liuga left, Riaz walked to the window and looked at this city full of lights. It seemed no different from the night in the underwater city, but here there's no smell of the sea. I'm not used to it. Riaz muttered to himself. I feel like I can smell the smell of Mr. Luo and Ms. Yuyi. Riaz? The witch's voice suddenly came, interrupting the young man's thoughts. Bring me a bath towel, I forgot. The young man looked at the magic dagger that was still inserted on the table in fear. He suddenly shivered, right away. The sea breeze blew gently, and her clothes fluttered in the wind. Gong Fanqing gazed at the pitch-black sea. That day when she fought with Qin Chuyu on the sea, she pushed Qin Chuyu into the deep sea, but she didn't look any better. However, after several months of recuperation, her injuries were almost healed. She could leave at any time. Gong Fanqing didn't expect that she would stay on the sea for several months. Of course, she didn't stay on the sea all the time. The cruise ship she was on a round-the-world tour. During these several months, the cruise ship stopped at many places. The next stop was the familiar land of Kelowna. Be careful not to catch a cold, beautiful lady. Someone gently put a shawl on Gong Fanqing's shoulder from behind. When she turned around, the first thing she saw was the man's glowing white teeth that were exposed when he smiled. Then she saw the 10 gemstone rings on the man's 10 fingers. Wolfgang. This was the man's name. At the same time, the other woman who accompanied Wolfgang called herself Charlotte, a mysterious and neurotic woman who always held a black umbrella and liked to do divination for others. Neither of them were simple people. Of course, Gong Fanqing was the same. As one of the few demons in Kelowna hundreds of years ago, she was certainly not a good person. It was a very simple story. Gong Fanqing was injured and was saved by Wolfgang on the sea. One wanted to recover, while the other wanted to have a beautiful encounter, so they naturally traveled together. But they didn't hit it off immediately. Wolfgang, who was very rich, was obviously favored by some lonely ladies on the cruise ship, but until now, he had not been able to move this demoness of the divine land from hundreds of years ago. I'm curious, you and Charlotte seem to be looking for something along the way. Gong Fanqing wrapped the shawl on her body, as if she was really bothered by the cold wind. What's on the ground? Madam, this should be a tacit understanding. Wolfgang said in a very magnetic voice. A tacit understanding that should be maintained between you and me. When it comes to things like origins, once we confess, we will lose the sense of mystery between us. It will even erase the passion between you and me. Gong Fanqing smiled faintly, then looked into the distance. Charlotte was standing on a high place, without an umbrella. She just opened her hands and faced the moon. She asked curiously, "What is she doing?" Wolfgang shrugged, hoping to get the guidance of the moon god, so that she can increase the success rate of her divination. In fact, the success rate of her divination is already very high. Gong Fanqing smiled. If you look at it the other way around, she is better than any divination master I know. Maybe only the successor of the plainclothes sect can compare. Plainclothes sect? Wolfgang asked curiously. It doesn't sound like a person's name. It's a sect. Gong Fanqing said faintly. It's a sect that specializes in divination and feng shui. It sounds very powerful. Wolfgang smiled faintly, but didn't seem to care. Charlotte shouldn't be done so soon. Miss Gong, I have prepared some gifts for us tonight. Are you interested in coming to my room? Not interested. Gong Fanqing smiled, took off the shawl, and stretched her hand out of the railing, letting the sea breeze blow the shawl away. Excuse me. Wolfgang didn't care, smiling as he watched Gong Fanqing leave. His fingers moved slightly, as if he was grabbing an invisible string in the wind, playing a soundless tune. Ah, midsummer night, I have good inspiration again. He leaned on the railing and closed his eyes. The music kept surging out of the performer's heart. Suddenly, Charlotte, who was at the highest point, started to tremble. She was like a crazy person as she hugged her arms tightly. Ah, I feel it. I feel it. The guidance of fate. Her voice was a bit loud, even interrupting Wolfgang's wonderful mood at this time. He jumped up with slight dissatisfaction and frowned. Miss Charlotte, what do you feel? Charlotte laughed strangely at this time, then her mouth suddenly cracked open, her eyes turned black, and her hair fluttered. Time is up. What time? Wolfgang, who was scared by Charlotte's crazy appearance, couldn't help but look dignified. It's time for instant noodles. 3 minutes. Wolfgang, the musician with a lot of money, opened his mouth and sighed, "Miss Charlotte, you're really a woman who can't arouse my interest no matter what." Wolfgang shook his head. After the musician's inspiration was interrupted, he didn't want to continue, so he came up with the idea of hunting on the dance floor in the cabin. There were still many beautiful women here. Because it was a cruise ship around the world, the proportion of high-quality women was quite good. On this luxury cruise ship named Austin House. Chapter 1916. But even after midnight, the rich musician still couldn't find a suitable partner. His inspiration was interrupted by Charlotte's nervous performance, and naturally, he couldn't recover. Some musicians were also the nervous type. Most of their ideas were wild, sudden, and even reckless. Wolfgang was planning to do something to stimulate his inspiration. Play the first movement. On the deck of the cruise ship, 10 rings made of special gems shone brightly, as if there were strings in the air. Wolfgang listened to something, then gently moved his fingers. On the calm sea surface, there were suddenly waves. They slowly moved toward the cruise ship from a distance, growing bigger and bigger until they became a large wave, directly hitting the hull. The luxurious cruise ship couldn't help but shake at this time. But this didn't alarm the tourists on the cruise ship. It was common to encounter some turbulence at sea. This was a cruise ship sailing around the world. Some of the tourists had even spent more than half a year on the cruise ship and had long been accustomed to it. But this night the waves seemed to be more intense. Shaking. Unknowingly, it had become a vibration, to the extent that the passengers couldn't stand still. "Passengers, please rest assured, we are passing through an undercurrent area, and we will pass through soon. Please try to stay in a safe place and steady yourself." The radio on the cruise ship was started to calm the wandering souls. However, the radio didn't have any effect because the more violent vibrations that accompanied it had made the passengers doubt the authenticity of the radio broadcast. Then, when the first scream was heard, people found that at this time the hull was tilting visibly at this time, and the tilting was still serious. At this time, a huge wave appeared at the back of the cruise ship, like a huge wall falling from the sky. It looked like the cruise ship was going to fall directly into the water. How can this be? The captain had been in the business for 30 or 40 years and had seen countless storms and waves, but at the moment of this monstrous wave, the veteran captain only had time to pick up the microphone in his hand and said his last words. "Thank God you and I met on this cruise ship. I'm very happy to see everyone's recognition of the work of the crew for more than 160 days. Pray, at the moment of death, the hull of the ship was tilting at a 90-degree angle, and a large number of tourists were thrown directly into the murky and dark sea. The musician on the deck played faster and faster, as if he was twitching. Wolfgang's face was full of excitement and fanaticism. "What are you doing?" Charlot, who was holding a black umbrella, and Gong Fanxing, the female devil of Shenzhou, appeared in front of Wolfgang almost at the same time and spoke in unison. "Shu, at such a perfect moment, please allow me to not respond to the hearts of the two ladies." He put his finger to his lips as he spoke softly, revealing his pearly white teeth. Gong Fanxing looked at the people who were constantly being thrown into the sea or running for their lives in despair. She couldn't help but frown. Was it too much? Perhaps. However, Wolfgang, who caused this disaster, was even more terrible. Those strings hidden in the air, each of them contained a terrible power. She didn't intend to continue watching. She gently stepped on the soles of her feet and directly soared into the sky. She supported her body to stay in the air with her incomparably vigorous true power. Charlotte waved her hand and stepped on a strange crow, slowly flying up as well. Whirlpool, in the murky sea, there was a huge and terrible whirlpool at this moment. Austin House was like a person who fell into a quagmire. The completely tilted hull was being swallowed by the whirlpool little by little. On the sea, Wolfgang's crazy laughter could actually cover the desperate screams of all the people on the ship. More. More. A little more. A little more intense. Intense. Ha 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 ha. Madman. Gong Fanqing shook her head. In the end, she couldn't continue watching and turned her gaze away. At this moment, Charlotte suddenly stretched out her hand and grabbed in the sea. Many souls roaring in despair suddenly rushed out and were sucked into her palm. Don't waste them. Gong Fanqing only heard Charlotte said so softly. She could feel that Wolfgang and Charlotte were not ordinary people along the way, but it was the first time that she saw the horror of these two people. Compared to herself, the name of the devil seemed more like these two guys. But on the high seas, who could stop such an unexpected disaster? The sea had been crazily closed into the cabin. In the space at the bottom of the cruise ship, the water had flooded all the road. The crew who worked here were now in despair, pale and powerless, waiting for the arrival of death. At this time, in the power room where the water was leaking everywhere, several crew members who managed to hide here with great difficulty were frightened. Suddenly, a crew member rushed to an engine with a crowbar. "What do you want to do?" "I've seen an old blueprint of this place. There seems to be an empty space under the floor. It's directly connected to an escape. But I don't know what's going on inside, but it's better than being trapped here." Hearing this, the crew members who had no way to escape instantly rushed up together. They worked together and soon pried open the floor. After preying open the floor, there was a round iron door at the end of the floor. The word "danger" was written on the iron door. However, the door hidden under the floor had given these desperate people hope to survive. At this time, they didn't care whether it was dangerous or not. Even if there was something with radiation or highly toxic, it was better than directly drowning here. The desperate crew members worked together again and finally succeeded in opening the iron door under the force of violence. A straight passage leading to the bottom with stairs made of iron frames appeared. "We have a chance. There is indeed a way here." They excitedly jumped into the vertical passage leading to the lower level of the cabin. It was not very deep. It wasn't a big space, but it wasn't easy to squeeze such a space under the engine room of the cruise ship. Everyone here was a veteran of the cruise ship, but they had never heard of such a secret place on the cruise ship. "I see, there is indeed a door here. It should be able to go out. There is no water on the floor here, and the water hasn't reached here yet. There is also a button here. It may be a control switch, but it seems to require a password and fingerprint. It's over, we don't have the authority to open it. It's already at this time, do you still care about this?" In order to survive, people desperately picked up crowbars and frantically smashed the control system here. They even pried open the floor here to find the buried circuit and tear it off. Fast and crazy. The electronic instruments flashed with bursts of sparks. The only door in the secret space finally reacted at this time. It slowly turned from top to bottom. A burst of cold mist began to spread in this secret space as the door turned down, but the crew members didn't see the way behind the door at this moment. There was no way. On the overturned door panel, there was only a huge cylindrical jar the size of a door panel. They were suddenly stunned by the fact that there was no way in front of them. The air was dead silent. "There's no way, only a broken jar, a jar." Suddenly, a burly man who was on the verge of collapse picked up the crowbar in his hand and began to smash the huge jar as if he had gone mad. "This broken thing! This broken thing! This broken thing!" Perhaps in the process of smashing, something happened. The jar suddenly popped out of the inner layer. Everyone was startled. The inner layer that popped out instantly released a horrible cold air, and suddenly frosted everyone's face. The air temperature suddenly dropped a lot. And in the inner layer, there was a naked man nearly 2 meters tall. "It's a corpse." However, it was too late for these crew members to panic because the continuous release of cold air from the jar began to frost the surroundings. "My feet!" The frost climbed along their bodies and completely froze them. In the end, the seawater still poured into this place, but it was quickly frozen into ice, completely freezing this place. Austin House. finally disappeared in the whirlpool of the sea. No one survived. It took a long time for the sea to gradually calm down. Wolfgang's hands slowly dropped down inside, but his brows slightly frowned, as if he wasn't very satisfied. What a pity. Wolfgang shook his head at this time. If there were Rose and Jack in this disaster, there would be a soul-stirring story. Wolfgang, you're so happy, but the key is, do we have to fly from the sea to the land? Charlotte, who was holding a black umbrella, slowly floated down at this time. I hate to see the sunrise on the sea. Anyway, it's not far, right? Wolfgang smiled slightly. Let's ride the sea breeze and paddle. Hearing this, Gong Fanqing suddenly had the idea of getting away from these two mysterious guys. A strong aura burst out from her body, and directly rushed to the distance, in the direction of the land of Kelowna. Miss Gong, please wait for me. Wolfgang at this time followed behind Gong Fanqing leisurely, as if he was taking a stroll in the courtyard. Charlotte shook her head. She subconsciously looked at the turbid sea. Ah, I feel it, it's a bad omen. But because her divination had always been in the opposite direction, Charlotte immediately shook her head, as if she was disappointed and happy. It's probably a good sign. She also followed Wolfgang's pace unhurriedly. She wanted to keep going to the east, to find her Lucifer, her king. This night, this forbidden city received many people from different places. But the residents living in the city didn't know this. Since half a month ago, a curfew had been implemented here. After 8 o'clock in the evening, people were no longer allowed to go out on the street. There were some troublemakers who still went out before the decree was issued, and the next day, they were reported to have been arrested. For a journalist, going back early was a very luxurious thing. At 6:30 in the evening, Auntie Ren and Lizzie had already returned downstairs of the family master's building. Ren Xiling seemed to be in a good mood, although she still had some small conflicts with the authority outside the summit meeting venue more than an hour ago. But Lizzie was fine after all, wasn't she? As for Auntie Ren, she was just a citizen. How could she confront such a huge organization like the authority? Relying on the word brave written on her chest? It was impossible. She still wanted to wait until the day when she had many children and grandchildren. Speaking of which, Lizzie. Auntie Ren didn't go upstairs immediately. Instead, she pulled Lizzie aside and asked mysteriously, "Do you still have the tonic pill that you brought from your hometown last time? Sister Ren, you haven't given up yet? If I don't succeed, I won't die in peace. No more." Lizzie shook her head and immediately asked tentatively, "Why don't you go to the pharmacy over there to get some blue pills? That thing is harmful to the body. My son is still young." Auntie Ren knocked Lizzie's head vigorously. She felt so wronged, and her tears seemed to be squeezed out. Is the tonic pill not harmful to the body? And forget it, I will go downstairs to the neighbor's house to get some leek. Auntie Ren didn't give up and continued to talk. Your neighbor's house also grows leeks? Lizzie blinked curiously. Auntie Ren was about to make a speech, but at this time, her eyes suddenly widened, and her face showed a touch of surprise. Then it was a look of surprise. Lizzie subconsciously turned around and looked. A man wearing sunglasses and a trench coat was walking toward them at this time. The man had a faint smile on his face, and the tone of his walking seemed to be a guy who practiced some fighting. I heard you say you want to get leeks from afar. The man came to the front of Auntie Ren and Lizzie, took off his sunglasses and chuckled. Why, which unlucky guy are you going to get leeks from? Yi Yen. Auntie Ren screamed at this time, then rushed forward without saying a word, and hugged the tall and thin man in a trench coat. When did you come back? Let me have a good look. I just got off the plane. The man. Yi Yen smiled slightly at this time. I plan to come to your house for a meal, do you mind? I don't mind. Auntie Ren said excitedly at this time, then she pressed her hands on Lizzie's shoulders and pushed her out. Even if you want to sleep with this girl, I have no objection. And ma? Lizzie pointed to herself subconsciously. Me? What's the situation? Chapter 1917. This should be one of the few lively days in this family in recent years, Ren Xiling thought. There was a tenant who was a foodie, Li Zi. There was an old friend with whom they had a deep friendship, Yi Yan. Of course, there was no lack of a sweetheart, and a more precious girlfriend. There were not many people, but the dining table was just enough to fill up, and the table was full of food. It was quite deserted outside because the curfew had already started, but the room was full of warm lights. There were also laughter. In fact, Ren Xiling was a person who loved to cry very much. Once, she didn't remember how long it had been since she last cried. While eating, Auntie Ren's eyes became misty. She said she didn't know what happened to her. It must be because of the bad guy Yi Yan suddenly appeared. Yi Yan cried out that he was wronged. Auntie Ren said it was him. This guy was used to be a playboy, and he often made the girls around him cry. It was him. Yi Yan didn't say anything. He just looked at the crowd and drank 3 glasses of wine as punishment. Then he forced Luo Qiu to drink another 3 glasses of wine. He said that he had found a pretty good girlfriend. As an uncle, he was overjoyed. He was really happy. Li Zi watched Auntie Ren and Yi Yan chatting on the table. Her main task was to eliminate the food on the table. In fact, more than half of the food had already fallen into her stomach. As for the rest, it probably wouldn't take long. The reason why she ate so willfully was that she knew that the people here didn't treat her as a stranger. They didn't discuss any of the topics that people talked about most at present, the extraordinary society, the revival of Aura. They only treated this meal as a common meal. A real common meal. They talked about a lot of things in the past. No, I can't drink anymore. I'll drink this glass, you guys can do whatever you want. She suddenly stood up, but she had to hold the table. She raised the glass in her hand again. Her face was red, and her eyes were blurred. But soon she directly lay on the table and fell asleep. It was already 10 o'clock in the evening. In fact, it was time to end. I have a question. Li Zi had licked the 3rd plate clean. She was addicted to Miss Yu Ye's cooking. Li Zi even felt that as long as the blonde cook was around, she would be unable to walk. What is it? Yi Yan couldn't help but curiously look at this little girl. It was the first time he saw a girl who could eat so much. She was really a talent. He didn't know where Ren Xiling picked up such an interesting little girl. It's already curfew time. Li Zi blinked and said, all the buses and vehicles in the city have stopped. What are you going to do? All of you. Of course, he was referring to Yi Yan and Yu Yi. If you don't mind, you can stay here tonight. Boss Luo looked at Yi Yan and said with a smile, I'll tidy up a room for you. Yi Yan was about to speak. But Auntie Ren, who was sleeping soundly, suddenly raised her face that was getting redder and redder. She even went into a drunken frenzy and grabbed the servant girl who was cleaning up the table. Why are you sleeping? I want to sleep with you. I want to sleep with you. Auntie Ren directly lay on Miss Maid's chest and rubbed coquettishly. Li Zi's eyes lit up instantly. Miss Maid didn't seem to have a good way to deal with this situation. It seemed that she could only let it go like this and murmured, this is really difficult. I'll take her into the room first. Anyway, Boss Luo thought for a while and said. Miss Maid suddenly smiled and said, if you don't mind, let me take care of her tonight. Boss Luo looked at her in surprise. After reading her eyes, he smiled slightly. Then I'll trouble you. In this case. Yi Yan smiled and said, little Luo Qiu, are you interested in sleeping with Uncle tonight? Li Zi's expression lit up again. We haven't had a good chat for a long time. Yi Yan smiled slightly. I'm going to be busy soon. It's estimated that we won't be able to meet for a long time. Why, don't you like an old man? Of course not. Luo Qiu shook his head. The matter was decided in this way, so there was only Li Zi left. She looked at the mess in the room again with an oh sound and raised her hands high. No one sleeps with Li Zi, I sleep by myself. There's still no change here. Yi Yan looked at the room. You've been fond of cleanliness since you were a child. The only feeling was that everything seemed to have a place where it should be. The kind of tidiness that would make people extremely uncomfortable if it was messy. I just came back. Luocio smiled. I haven't lived here for a long time, and this room hasn't been cleaned up. You've changed, Yi Yan suddenly said. Luocio looked at him. Yi Yan smiled. You're more cheerful than before, which is a good thing. And you've found a girlfriend, which is even better. Luocio smiled. He wouldn't be the boss tonight. What about Uncle Yi? Are you still alone? Or do you plan to be alone all the time? If you're single for a long time, you'll find everything beautiful. Yi Yan joked. You'll find that there are too many good-looking women in the world, and you can't chase them all. Instead, you'll get a lot of romantic debt. So, the conclusion is, of course, it's more comfortable to be alone. But there seemed to be an old friend in his eyes. Luocio went out and poured a cup of warm water for Yi Yan. There was no one outside the room, and they all returned to their own rooms. In fact, you're more like your mother. Yi Yan smiled. If you're like your father, you don't know how to take care of others. He needs others to take care of him more. Of course, he's really busy with work. Luocio smiled and didn't say anything. Speaking of taking care of others, perhaps he was the one who was always taken care of. Aren't you curious why I suddenly came back? Yi Yan held the cup between his hands and slowly turned it back and forth. Are you going to say it, Uncle Yi? Yi Yan smiled and shook his head. We're not talking about work tonight. So, it was because of work. By the way, Yi Yan said, do you still have the saxophone I gave you? Wait for me. Boss Luo nodded and took out the instrument from the cabinet. She had seen this messy room more than once. Ren Xiling's room. When she saw Ren Xiling for the first time, her master was still ignorant and asked her to solve the problem of Ren Xiling seeing something she shouldn't see. At that time, she was curious about the woman who lived with her master. Even after inheriting the shop, her master still insisted on coming back at night to take care of her. She buried this curiosity in the bottom of her heart. She only pieced together the true image of Ren Xiling bit by bit every time her master mentioned her and in the limited number of times they met. Not everyone could put their hands on her shoulders, not everyone could touch her intimately, and not everyone could do unscrupulous things to her body. But Ren Xiling could. She couldn't even find a reason to refuse. Yu Yi sat quietly at the bedside and looked at Auntie Ren, who had changed into pajamas. She could even find 1,000 places with such an indecent sleeping posture. But so what? Miss Ren, thank you for taking care of my master and loving him before I met him. Miss Maid gently covered Ren Xiling with a quilt. She didn't need to sleep, so it was okay to sit all the time. She planned to return to the shop directly and appear again when she needed it. But she seemed to have underestimated the horror of a drunk woman. Miss Maid, who had just covered herself with the quilt, suffered an unprecedented attack. Aunt Ren suddenly stretched out her hand and directly grabbed Miss Maid's wrist. Huh! Miss Maid was surprised at first. Her body was then pulled onto the bed and rolled. Auntie Ren skillfully wrapped herself around Miss Maid's body like an octopus. Maybe she treated Miss Maid as a quilt, a pillow, or a big doll. The kind of comfortable sleeping position where one likes to hold something when sleeping. Oh, it's getting more and more difficult. Aunt Ren's face had already rubbed against Miss Maid's face, and her hands began to become restless. Probably it was an instinct. Miss Maid slowly breathed a sigh of relief. She still didn't panic when facing this kind of thing. She planned to gently push Ren Xiling's body away with her strength. As for the forbidden magic in the city, it couldn't restrict her. Son. But Auntie Ren suddenly called out in her dream. Miss Maid suddenly stopped and saw Ren Xiling was just sleep-talking at this time. She shook her head. Remember, be good to your girlfriend, or I won't let you go. Boys should be more considerate to girls. If you make my future daughter-in-law angry, I'll give you a pastoral combination punch. Are you afraid? Take my scissors kick. This is probably a very rich dream. The little drama in Miss Ren's mind has always been very exciting, Miss Maid thought. but she still gently pushed Ren Xiling away and stood up again. After getting up, she meticulously tidied up the messy and wrinkled dress. According to Miss Maid's usual habit, if the dress was messed up like this, she would directly burn it and never wear it a second time. But this time, she had the idea of keeping the dress for the first time. Miss Maid smiled gently and covered Aunt Ren with the quilt again. She planned to go back to the shop. Just as she turned around, Aunt Ren's legs suddenly stretched out from the quilt. Miss Maid, who had always pursued perfection, couldn't stand this, so she once again put Ren Xiling's legs and covered her with the quilt again. But this time it was her hands. Covered with the quilt. Turned over. Covered with the quilt. Kicked the quilt. Covered with the quilt. Miss Maid finally sighed and decided to leave it like this for tonight. She didn't want to go back. She sat quietly at the bedside. This will be the only human being who has the honor of being taken care of by me except for the owner of the shop. Miss Maid thought. I don't hate her. Luocio spent some time to dig out the suitcase with the saxophone from the cabinet and then gave it to Yi Yen with both hands. Yi Yen fondled the saxophone that had accompanied him for many days in nostalgia. Soon after, he began to play. This was his favorite song and also the first song that Luocio learned. It was very comfortable to listen to at night. Yesterday once more. Luocio couldn't play the feeling of Yi Yen. He missed the feeling of the past. In fact, Yi Yen was a gentler man than anyone else. Luocio suddenly had the idea of giving this gentleness to the whole city. A thought came to him. In the next room, Ren Xiling didn't kick the quilt anymore and really fell asleep. But she had already grabbed Miss Maid's hand and put it in front of her face like a baby. What a gentle song! Miss Maid smiled slightly. Long Shirua came back in the middle of the night. Maybe because it was fully charged, she looked very energetic. Kelowna Shinryu, who couldn't sleep, planned to continue the unfinished copy. But the copy had already been finished, in failure. Kelowna Shinryu exploded with anger. She took a bottle of beer and climbed to the rooftop, looking at the quiet city while enjoying the wind. Unconsciously, she calmed down a lot. She seemed to be comforted by something, but there was also some sadness. Wine was not intoxicating, and she gradually became a little tipsy. Luo Dance fell asleep very early. She always had the style of sleeping early and waking up early. She smiled. She must have had a good dream tonight. Hey, in the abandoned building there was a long old sofa, the kind of sofa that was so broken that one could see the sponge squeezed out. More than a dozen monster cubs listened to Sister Blackwater's story and fell asleep unconsciously. But her voice didn't stop. She continued to read the story in the storybook softly. Yen Xiaoxi was still working. There were 2 stacks of documents in front of his desk, almost taller than his head. He suddenly felt a little tired, so he leaned on the back of the chair and planned to rest for a while. But unconsciously, he fell asleep. Fire Cloud Evil God came over with a bowl of ginseng tea. Seeing that Yen Xiaoxi fell asleep, he walked out carefully again. Riaz was so interested in everything in the world above ground. After learning how to operate the computer, he planned to cram in the knowledge of the civilization above ground, regardless of Lyoga's objection. The female demon of the underwater city couldn't dissuade him, so she had to let him be. Soon after, she leaned on the sofa and fell asleep. Later, Riaz brought a blanket and covered her with it. This feels good. 2 figures sat on the bench in the park. They just sat there strangely, and one of them even said that he was a little sleepy. Then sleep, this feeling is really good. We don't need to hurry to find the dimension observer. Okay, Song Hauran failed to sneak up on the princess of the Qin nation again, and was kicked out of the room. Song Ying didn't know how Song Hauran managed to lie on the ground with his head down. She, who was wearing pajamas, couldn't stop laughing. Song Hauran, who was a little hurt, thought of looking for the seniors of the Tao Society to have a drink and chat with them. At the same time, he wanted to flirt with the ladies that he paid for. The granddaughter of the Song family couldn't be bothered with him, and directly returned to her room with a pillow. At this moment, Zhang Qingrui of the Zhang family called, saying that she couldn't sleep and wanted to chat. Thus, they each laid on their own beds and chatted. As they chatted, they unknowingly talked about a name that everyone intentionally avoided. What a dead person! Song Ying thought to herself. The plane had just arrived. The people of the Magician Association were still at the airport. Elizabeth, who was carrying a small suitcase, held Zhong Luoyue's hand and slowly came down from the escalator. Miraculously, the two tower masters, who were originally arguing, calmed down after getting off the plane. The Scarlet Flame Tower Master, who always had a fiery temper, seemed to be in a good mood at this moment. The Ice Tower Master's face was also not as cold as before. This city is really magical, it seems to be able to make people feel better. The vampire girl said softly at this time. Zhong Luoyue nodded softly. The whole city seemed to be asleep. Li Zi opened the window. It was late at night outside. She leaned against the window and rested her chin on her hands. She looked at the moon that was about to turn round. She gently shook her head along with the rhythm of the music coming from the window. The moon seemed to have turned into an egg tart and was smiling at her. Chapter 1918. Li Zi opened her mouth and took a big bite. Then, she suddenly opened her eyes. Then, a sharp pain began to spread from her fingers to her head. Her whole body was trembling as if her tail was going to stand up, if she had a tail. She had bitten 3 of her fingers. Pooh! Pooh pooh pooh! She could only get up. She was hungry and smelled the food. She pushed the door open. Luochio was cleaning up the mess from last night in the living room. The kitchen door was half closed. Miss Yi was busy inside. The smell. Morning! Li Zi shouted blankly. At this time, Boss Luo raised his head and opened his mouth in surprise. Then, he smiled calmly and said, "Good morning." Li Zi found a very bad thing at this time. She either lived alone or was not used to living with Sister Ren, whose daily life was also terrible. She woke up habitually, but forgot that there were more people in the house today. "I'm going back to my room." Li Zi, who was only wearing 2 pieces of pink underwear, was attracted by the smell of food. She lowered her head and turned around. She put her hands behind her back, covering her buttocks, and ran into the room like a duck. Just as she slammed the door shut, the door to another room opened. Auntie Rin walked out with a zombie-like bent body. Her complexion didn't look too good, and her lips were even dry. "I want to die." This was the consequence of waking up the next day after being drunk. Auntie Ren's throat was gurgling. She immediately covered her mouth and rushed into the bathroom. It seems to be lively again. Miss Maid came out with a plate of breakfast at this time. She was also wearing an apron with a little bear pattern on it. The blonde cook looked very pleasing to the eye at this moment. "You're also very beautiful today." Boss Luo smiled. Ren Xiling rubbed her forehead while drinking the yogurt that was taken out from the refrigerator. The yogurt was prepared by Luochio, and she could only drink it now. "So, when did Yi Yen leave?" Ren Xiling still felt uncomfortable in her throat. The feeling after vomiting was not far from the feeling of using something hard to rub her throat. He woke up before dawn. He said he had something to do and left first. Luochio said calmly, "About 5:30. "So early." Ren Xiling murmured and continued to rub her forehead. Her brain was in a mess and she didn't want to use her brain at all. Li Zi ate bowl after bowl of food in silence. She lowered her head and ate very quickly. Soon, she said that she was full and ran back to her room like a bolt of lightning. "What's wrong with her today?" Madame Ren, who had a headache, asked in confusion. "I don't know." Boss Luo, just a simple smile. Madame Ren shook her head and didn't want to use her brain. She immediately said, "I can't eat. I really can't eat. Pack these things for me and I'll take them to the company. I'll heat them up at noon. I'm going to change my clothes, it's time to go to work." "Damn work, sooner or later I'll." "Hey, I'm a boss now? Stupid. Madame Ren walked back to her room while muttering. Not long after, Ren Xiling went out of the door in low spirits. No one noticed when Lizzie went out. After packing up, the servant girl cut a plate of fruit and sat beside Boss Luo. She carefully began to peel the skin of the grape. Boss Luo smiled and turned on the TV. On the TV, the scene at this time was a bird's-eye view of the city. Where should I start? Boss Luo looked at one place and suddenly smiled. Let's start here. There was a sound, it was the sound of slogans. Lord Long. We all want to meet. If we don't meet today, we won't get up. The servant girl just glanced at it and lost interest. She continued to peel the skin of the grapes attentively. She planned to peel all the grapes on the plate. This one was Kelowna Shinryu, this one was Long Shiro, this one was Kelowna Zealand, this one was Long Shiro, and so on. Lord Long. Lord Long. Their voices gradually became uniform. After several days of continuous shouting, this group of big bosses of the monster race gradually became like retired cadres who were learning to sing in an old people's club. The reward was a plate of water poured from the window upstairs. I just washed my feet, take it, no need to thank me. Long Shirua closed the window and ignored them. The people downstairs, the monsters downstairs, especially those who grew up listening to Kelowna Shinryu's invincibility, suddenly shivered at this time. Am I going to improve my power? The water with Shinryu's breath. This is sister, no, this is holy water. Even though the window was closed, Long Shirua could still hear the gradually strange sound from downstairs. She covered her ears and rushed out of the room with murderous intent, just in time to meet Luo dance. Then, the true dragon of the divine land was actually bounced away, completely defeated by the little butterfly demon's growing ferocious creature. It's time for you to lose weight, Long Shirua said in a serious tone. The little butterfly monster was full of question marks. Lose weight? Her body weight in human form had always been about 90 kilograms, never exceeding 100 kilograms. But the little butterfly monster shook her head quickly. Sister Long, Little Fei asked me to give this to you. He came back yesterday, but you went out at that time. Little Fei stayed for a while and then went home. Mo Xiaofei came back? Kelowna Shinryu gave a start, frowning subconsciously with a thoughtful look. Luo Dance handed the things brought by Mo Xiaofei to Long Shirua, then went downstairs to prepare breakfast. Long Shirua had to go back to the room and put on the earphones. After a while, she began to open the things sent by Mo Xiaofei. Inside the box was an unknown metal fragment with an irregular shape, as if it was torn out from somewhere. What is this? She picked up this metal fragment and looked at it carefully. The moment she touched it, she felt that this metal fragment was quite heavy, and there were some very old broken characters engraved on it. As for how old it was, it could only be found in the innermost part of the book pavilion of Xianyuan Palace. It was the earliest language used in Kelowna Lady. Xian? Kelowna Shinryu frowned, then put the metal fragment into the box, hurriedly went downstairs and went straight to the underground training ground. I'm not going to eat breakfast, I have to go out. Before leaving, Kelowna Shinryu ran into the kitchen and said, Pour a plate of water on me at noon, 2 plates. What could the little butterfly monster say? Of course, she wouldn't. Shaking her head, the little butterfly monster casually glanced at the calendar on the wall. Tomorrow was the first day of the extraordinary summit meeting. Yen Xiaoxi woke up in the morning with a stiff neck. He didn't expect that he would sleep here for a night, but he felt much better. The gloomy feeling of being trapped in the gray and stagnant world seemed to have been swept away. He felt like he had just come back from a vacation. Perhaps he had really reached his limit and thus fell asleep unknowingly. Yen Xiaoxi soon found a reasonable explanation. He picked up his phone and saw that there were many missed calls and messages. Yen Xiaoxi opened them one by one. The Magician Association's diplomatic mission arrived at midnight. This was one of the more important messages, so Yen Xiaoxi had to pay attention to it. Although there were many different kinds of inhuman organizations in the inhuman realm, the Magician Association was undoubtedly the largest and most ferocious organization. It was rumored that the first tower master of the association, Hui Yao, was invincible in the entire European world. As for the Magician Association itself, it was also quite large. To a certain extent, it even represented the order of the inhuman realm in the entire European world. However, Yan Xiaoxi couldn't take the initiative to contact the diplomatic mission of the Magician Association at this time. He couldn't take the initiative to contact any party before the extraordinary summit started, so as to avoid releasing signals that would make the other extraordinary diplomatic missions feel uneasy. The diplomatic mission of Underwater City was an exception. The higher-ups of the administration seemed to have the intention to reach some in-depth cooperation with Underwater City, and they didn't intend to disclose the existence of Underwater City for the time being. Yan Xiaoxi continued to look through the messages, most of which were some miscellaneous tasks, as well as some messages from groups that had yet to arrive. Tomorrow was the first day of the meeting, and most of the people who were supposed to be here had already arrived. The rest were probably little princes and the like. Is it useful? Yan Xiaoxi couldn't help but shake his head. However, at this moment, a new message came directly. Yan Xiaoxi glanced at it, and his face instantly turned solemn. The new message roughly read: Early this morning, a black shaman from the inhuman realm was found dead in his room. Preliminary judgment is that this is a murder case. It's suddenly troublesome. Section Chief Yen frowned immediately. On the streets of Japan, in a very popular ramen restaurant, Natsuya Suzuki was eating ramen very generously. The soup splattered everywhere. At this moment, a piece of tissue was suddenly extended in front of Natsuya Suzuki. He froze in shock and turned around, only to see that there was an ordinary-looking middle-aged man with gray hair sitting beside him. He was wearing a gray beret and a pair of gold-rimmed glasses. You are that comic artist who's very good at drawing comics. Natsuya Suzuki opened his mouth and pondered hard. What's your name again? Cha-Tian? He was obviously a popular writer who had a very high status in the comic world of Japan and had been serialized for more than 20 years. His name was Cha-Tian. You said that if I wanted to find you, I would naturally find you. Cha-Tian smiled at this moment. I've tried it and it's true. Natsuya Suzuki didn't use a tissue. Instead, he wiped his mouth with his sleeve and perked up. He squinted and said with a smile, Why? Do you have a business deal for me? I'm best at collecting debts for people. It doesn't matter how bad the debt is. No one owes me a debt. Cha-Tian smiled faintly. Natsuya Suzuki immediately lost interest. Then there's nothing to talk about. If you're just curious about me, this meal is a meeting fee. Thank you. How about we talk about another business deal? Cha-Tian suddenly said. Natsuya Suzuki tilted his head. Would you be interested in being my bodyguard for a few days? Bodyguard? Cha-Tian nodded. I'm going to a place with a lot of people soon. It may be dangerous or it may not. I just want to make some preparations. It's not convenient for me to be alone. If there's someone like you, it should be much more convenient. His main profession is a debt collector, which is actually the traditional so-called thug. Thug being a bodyguard and so on is not a problem in itself. Anyway, it's all about fighting, and this is indeed what Suzuki Shea is best at. What are you going to do? He asked curiously. I'm going to record something, Cha-Tian said indifferently. Just think of it as me going to collect literature. How about it? Do you agree? Think carefully. I'm not cheap. Natsuya Suzuki narrowed his eyes. Don't worry. I won't let you down in terms of price. Cha-Tian smiled faintly. Natsuya Suzuki also chuckled. I'll decide according to the situation. I'll settle with you at the end. As long as you don't regret it, then this meal will be the deposit. Boss, pack 10 dumplings for me to take away. Cha Tian shook his head as he watched this rascal walk out with a big bag full of dumplings. He felt that Natsuya Suzuki was not only mysterious but also interesting. He immediately called his assistant. Plane ticket. Please add 2 more people. An adult and a child. He would not represent Japan. Japan's psionic ability world did not know of his existence. He would not represent anyone. He simply wanted to record this major event that would change the entire world. Transcendence Summit Meeting. Gong Fanqing walked on the waves. Even for someone like her, flying in the air would consume a considerable amount of energy. Furthermore, the speed at which she walked on the waves was not slow. However, Wolfgang and Charlotte were following behind her at a steady pace. This made Gong Fanqing feel rather annoyed. She was unable to get rid of these 2 mysterious fellows. But right at this moment, Gong Fanqing suddenly heard a long whistle. The she-devil of the divine land couldn't help but be shocked. This is, His Holiness's. Gong Fanqing's face immediately lit up and her speed increased by a lot. Wolfgang and Charlotte naturally heard the long whistle as well. The 2 of them who were puzzled also increased their speed. Soon, they saw a small island. The island was actually not far away from the mainland. They could even see the distant coastline. At this moment, on the island, there was a dignified man in his 30s who was standing with his hands clasped behind his back. Seeing him, Gong Fanqing sped up again. She jumped in front of the man and knelt down directly. Greetings to his honor. The man did not say anything. He just looked indifferently at Wolfgang and Charlotte, who were following behind Gong Fanqing. He frowned slightly. Who are they? Several months ago, I had a fight with Qin Qiu, the successor of Huanjin sect. I was injured and fell into the sea. I drifted overseas. These 2 rescued me from the sea. That's how I got to know them. Gong Fanqing had to give a simple explanation. The dignified man nodded. His figure flashed and appeared in front of Wolfgang. Without saying anything, he pushed out his palm. Wolfgang originally looked relaxed. However, the moment the man pushed out his palm, his expression changed slightly. He frowned and his fingers moved quickly. The vibrations in the air surged at this time, and an illusory light screen condensed in front of him in an instant. The man's palm imprinted on the light screen. The light screen was broken instantly. Wolfgang had no choice but to step back a few steps. As for the man, he also stepped back a few steps. He looked at Wolfgang with surprise and muttered, "Your strength is really rare. I admire you. You're not bad either." Wolfgang was not sure about the man's background. Therefore, he became more cautious. "You're a guest from afar. Why don't you come to the island for a chat?" The man said indifferently, "I've been meditating on the island these days. I built a small house which is quite elegant." With a chuckle, the man turned around and left. Gong Fanqing hurriedly stood up and followed the man. His honor's power has actually recovered to such an extent. It seems that during the time when he was drifting overseas, he had already swallowed a lot of essence and blood of Song family's descendants. Emperor Song. ######### PS1. First of all, I want to thank the cute Lord of Sudden Transformation. I want to give a solid salute to the capitalist boss. PS2, 0/1, PS3. This chapter is from yesterday. Something strange happened yesterday. I was caught by the big-breasted alien and was just released. Sure enough, writing is more enjoyable. Chapter 1919. The island was very small, but they could see some traces of human life on the road. Wolfgang and Charlotte soon saw the small house mentioned by the man who made Gong Fanqing kneel. It was indeed a very small house, hidden in the forest of the island. "I smell something on this guy that should only belong to the dead." Charlotte's words suddenly rang in Wolfgang's ears, but he didn't say anything. He just nodded thoughtfully. The dead. The dead wouldn't have such a strong power. It wasn't that he was afraid, but more of a curiosity. The transcendents were limited in the modern world, and the more dangerous the subworld was, the greater the restrictions. Even the so-called gods were often disappointed. But the other party was obviously not such a person. Was he the pinnacle creature created by the modern world? They called all those who reached the limit of the modern world but didn't leave the modern world as pinnacle creatures, or ultimate powerhouses. The people in the Transcendence organization wouldn't look down on any pinnacle creature in the modern world. The only difference between a pinnacle creature and a transcendent was that one was inside, while the other was outside. But in theory, the maximum power that they could release in the modern world was equal. The Shinryu in Kelowna dared to say that even if an immortal came, he would beat them up if he didn't like them, because of this equal condition. However, this subworld allowed too many pinnacle creatures to exist. Wolfgang muttered something in his heart, but he saw that the man leading the way had stopped and invited them into the simple house. Wolfgang and Charlotte looked at each other and understood each other's intention, to wait and see. "You can call me Mr. Song." The man smiled. "For now, I will act as Mr. Song. In other words, you don't intend to tell us your true identity, right?" Wolfgang smiled indifferently. What kind of people hadn't he seen before? From the transcended thrones to the wandering ghosts. He wouldn't be surprised by the other party's true identity. At most, he would feel curious, but he didn't necessarily want to know. It would depend on whether the other party was worth it or not. For example, the King of Hell that he and Charlotte were searching for was obviously worth it. If he could trick Lucifer into joining the Transcending Grade organization, then he would be able to reap great rewards for his hard work. Recruiting a King of Hell to become a member was much more profitable than the other guys working hard to find a newcomer with potential. "No, I plan to tell you." Mr. Song smiled. "But only after you pledge your loyalty to me." Wolfgang was startled. As for Charlotte, she was sizing him up with great interest. In the end, Wolfgang shook his head. He was a musician. He would only be irritated when there was a problem with his inspiration. Normally, he was like a gentleman. Even when he heard ridiculous words, he was still quite calm. He smiled and said, "Perhaps Mr. Song still doesn't understand the current situation. Of course, this is understandable, but it's a pity that we won't pledge our loyalty to anyone. We are free. The more powerful a person is, the more arrogant they will be, even rebellious." Mr. Song said indifferently, "I understand this point very well because I've seen many talented people like this. But in the end, they all submit." "Why?" Wolfgang wasn't angry at all. He only felt that it was ridiculous. He smiled and asked, "Because?" At this time, Mr. Song's face was solemn, and his voice was like 1,000 mountains. "All under the sky is the king's territory. All on the shores of the earth are the king's subjects. I am the world." Wolfgang's and Charlotte's expressions changed slightly. Mr. Song's voice directly crashed into their hearts, and was madly attacking their inherent belief. However, not to mention Wolfgang, who was a transcending grade expert who walked in the void, even Charlotte was a banshee who often accompanied the King of Hell. How could they submit so easily? They couldn't resist for more than a moment. Mr. Song's solemn voice was instantly expelled from their hearts. Wolfgang immediately snorted coldly. When a musician lost his temper, he wouldn't recognize anyone, let alone a stranger. Charlotte's eyes suddenly turned from frivolous to sharp. She suddenly pulled out the black umbrella, and a sharp thin sword was hidden inside. But at this time, an 8 trigrams mark appeared in the air. Wolfgang and Charlotte were trapped in this 8 trigrams mark at the same time. A purple light flashed on Mr. Song's face. The 8 trigrams mark instantly shrank at this time. Wolfgang and Charlotte felt this mark almost at the same time. The moment this mark appeared, their souls seemed to be scattered. Wolfgang's face had a trace of incredulity. He had seen this kind of 8 trigrams before. This seems to be the Fushi throne's illusion? However, before the incredulity in his heart completely dissipated, The 8 trigrams mark had already locked him and Charlotte at the same time. At the same time, Mr. Song slowly said, "Great Tao of primordial chaos. Soul lock seal." The 8 trigrams mark instantly shattered. At the same time, the same 8 trigrams mark appeared on the back of Wolfgang's and Charlotte's left hands at the same time. It was as if it was imprinted with fire. The 8 trigrams mark on the back of their hands gave the two a burning feeling from time to time, directly connecting their souls. It was excruciating. Then, Mr. Song waved his hand, and a strong wind directly swept Wolfgang and Charlotte out of the door. Mr. Song said indifferently, "From now on, the two of you are the king's subjects. If you are disloyal, you will suffer the pain of having your soul locked. Now, I will let the two of you experience the pain of having your soul locked." Wolfgang and Charlotte, who were swept out of the door, fell into a pool outside the house at this time. They floated out of the water, and the moment they heard the voice of Mr. Song, the two of them began to scream like never before. In the wooden house, Mr. Song, who had just used the soul lock seal, suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. His age seemed to disappear in an instant, and he suddenly looked like he was in his 40s from his 30s. His temples were a little more gray, and his face was a lot thinner. "Your Excellency!" Gong Fanxing was shocked. Mr. Song waved his hand and said indifferently, "I'm fine. I just lost some essence blood. I can make up for it from my descendants later. Since Gong Sun Hua is dead, it's inconvenient for you to work for me alone. It's worth it to subdue these two people this time." Gong Fanxing said worriedly, "Your Excellency, Wolfgang and Charlotte are mysterious. I haven't seen the bottom line of their strength. I don't know if the soul lock seal can really subdue these two people." "Why not?" Mr. Song said indifferently, "Even immortals will be suppressed by the soul lock seal when they are lost. This is the Emperor's martial art from the Xianyuan Palace. There are immortals suppressed by the soul lock seal in the Xianyuan Palace." Gong Fanxing's eyes suddenly changed. This was a secret she had never heard before. "I'm tired. I need to rest." Mr. Song waved his hand again and said, "After they have tasted the pain of the soul lock seal, you can tell them the rules." "I know." Gong Fanxing's face was pale, but she respectfully left the wooden house. However, as soon as she left, there was a surge of purple chi on Mr. Song's face. His aging continued at this time, but it seemed to be forcibly suppressed. At most, it stopped. Mr. Song's eyes couldn't help but become a little tired. Those descendants are all mixed in good and bad. Not many of them can be useful. Mr. Song's eyes gradually became gloomy. Only the most outstanding descendants, those who can fight for the dragon, can really revive me. Song Haoren, don't let me wait too long. In a quiet courtyard in the city. Judging from the situation at the scene, the deceased didn't get into a fight with anyone before he died. According to the other members of the diplomatic mission, they returned to their rooms after dinner. As for the deceased, he had the habit of praying every night and didn't like to be disturbed by others. Yen Xiaoxi was covering her mouth and nose with a piece of tissue paper while listening to the preliminary investigation report. At this moment, he was at the crime scene of the murder, one of the guest houses that had been prepared for the various envoys of the summit. The deceased was a black uncle who looked to be in his 50s. His face was full of tattoos. Then, there was the look of his death. This black uncle priest from the Middle Earth was only left with his skin at this time. All the internal organs, bones, and muscles under the skin had completely melted and were discharged from the pores on his body. The carpet on the floor was directly stained with sewage. What about the first person who found the deceased? It was the deputy of the diplomatic mission. It was daybreak, and he found the corpse when he came to deliver breakfast to the priest. Then, he informed us, "Our people are trying to appease the members of the diplomatic mission, but it doesn't seem to be working." At this time, the subordinate said anxiously, "This priest has a very high prestige in their land. If we can't solve this matter, Yen Xiaoxi frowned and said, surveillance cameras, standing guard, secret room. We didn't find anything for the entire night. Logically speaking, all supernatural powers should be prohibited here. The subordinate was puzzled and said, no one should be able to avoid our surveillance and come in from the outside. Yen Xiaoxi suddenly said, apart from this diplomatic mission, what other diplomatic missions have been arranged to stay here? Apart from this diplomatic mission, there are 3 others. The subordinate quickly said, basically, they're all from the non-Middle-earth continent. The relationship between the supernatural organizations in the non-Middle-earth continent is very complicated and there are many of them. The ones who can participate in this meeting are local organizations that have a history of more than 100 years or even hundreds of years. However, when we arranged for them to stay here, we've already done some research and separated the organizations that have conflicts with each other. There are no conflicts between the diplomatic missions that have stayed here. In fact, 2 of them have always been friendly with each other. I'd like to meet the leaders of these 3 organizations. Go and make the arrangement. Yen Xiaoxi nodded and immediately instructed, seal everything here first. I know that we can't keep this a secret, but at least before sunset, we can't let too many people know about this. Tomorrow is the first day of the meeting and I don't want to cause too much trouble. There was a murder on the day before the meeting. It seems like this matter is directed at us. Chief, do you mean that there's a high possibility that someone is trying to sabotage this summit meeting? I hope not, Yen Xiaoxi said in a low voice. Yen Xiaoxi said in a deep voice, also, send 2 more teams here to search this guesthouse thoroughly. Give me the results in an hour. Yes. Daddy, there's a big guy outside. In the passenger plane that was flying abroad, the child was lying in front of the window and yelling without turning his head. As the father, the man moved away casually. The big guy probably looked like a white cloud that looked like a hippopotamus. The man closed the window casually and said, the sun is going to shine in later and it'll be very glaring. Be good. The child still wanted to look, but he soon gave in under the stern gaze of his father and turned to look at the skirt of the flight attendant. At this moment, the passenger plane suddenly shook. Please don't panic, it's just a turbulence. It's all right now. At the same time, the broadcast system of the passenger plane sounded. Why is there turbulence all of a sudden? The captain looked at the dashboard in surprise, but there was no warning at all. However, the plane soon returned to normal, and he had no choice but to shake his head. What the captain did not know was that a huge black shadow was swimming through the clouds at this moment. The black shadow swept past the plane and flew into the distance. It looked like a huge black dragon in Western mythology. We should be arriving at our destination soon. On the back of the black dragon, Miss Soul, which was looking at the map with difficulty. At the same time, she glared at the figure sitting on the black dragon's head, unmoving despite the strong wind blowing against him. Feral. She still could not understand why this old guy did not want to take the plane which was so convenient. Instead, he forcefully grabbed the black dragon and made it cross the entire Eurasian continent and enter the mysterious Kelowna of the East. At this moment, Miss Soul which climbed to the black dragon's neck with difficulty. Then she grabbed the scales and climbed up the dragon's head to Feral's side. She did not care about her hair that was blown up by the wind and directly roared in Feral's ear, "I can't stand it any more. I want to go down." Feral ignored her. Without his order, even the arrogant black dragon did not dare to stop at this moment. Miss Soul, who was already angry, had to directly grab Feral's shoulder and fiercely bite down. Her teeth almost broke. How hard is this old guy's body? Feral, who had been resting with his eyes closed, opened his eyes. He then knocked on the dragon's horn, and the black dragon instantly stopped. Miss Soul, which was thrown out by the inertia. "I can't fly. Help!" Miss Soul, which instantly screamed in horror. A white light flashed from the dragon's back. The chubby granddaughter of the sword saint rushed out like a swimming dragon. She repeatedly swung her sword in the air, making the air crackle. She used the motion of swinging her sword to stop her body in the air, and rushed out, grabbing Miss Soul Witch by the collar and finally returning to the black dragon's head. That was close. The chubby girl let out a long sigh of relief. Miss Soul Witch, who was still in shock, did not have the time to be grateful. She hurriedly glared at Farrell. "Old man, are you trying to kill me so that you don't have to fulfill your promise? Why did you suddenly stop?" Farrell stood up and looked ahead. After a long while, he slowly said, "We can't go forward anymore." "Why?" Miss Soul Witch asked instinctively. Farrell did not say anything. He just pulled out his sword from Miss Soul Witch's hand and slashed. A huge sword light instantly broke through the clouds and shot directly into the distance. However, in just a moment the sword light had disappeared. It was not the kind of disappearance where the momentum was exhausted, but the kind where it disappeared without a trace. This. Miss Soul Witch could not help but open her mouth. This is the rumored anti-magic space. She subconsciously glanced at the old man, Farrell, and could not help but worry about his plans. Farrell had always been looking for the so-called newcomers with potential, so that he could fight against the so-called Great Terror that he had mentioned. But when he heard about the appearance of the World Extraordinary Summit, this guy suddenly changed his plans. He had a new plan. In the old man's words, this was a good opportunity to gather forces. Who knew if this old man would go crazy during the World Extraordinary Summit? Thinking about it this way, the anti-magic space seemed to be a good thing. At least if this old man really went crazy, it would not be a situation where no one could stop him. "What are you waiting for? Hurry up and go in." Miss Soul Witch became excited. As long as she entered the anti-magic space, she had 10,000 ways to change this situation where the man was stronger than the woman. It was time to change the situation. But at this moment, a small black shadow suddenly appeared in front of everyone. It was a black drone used for filming. A small probe extended from the drone hovering in front of the crowd. A voice then came out from the probe. "This is the China administration, the temporary headquarters of the summit meeting. You have violated the relevant regulations of our country regarding the prohibition of flying for transcendent beings. Please show your identification immediately. Otherwise, we will treat this as bang." The drone directly split into two and then exploded in the air. The one who made the move was Farrell, who was still holding Miss Soul Witch's sword. "What is the Kelowna authority?" Farrell asked calmly. "You only asked after you split it?" Miss Soul Witch suddenly felt dizzy and cursed. "Crazy! Crazy!" In other words, this is the innate mechanism of the East. "I understand now." Farrell nodded. After spending a lot of time explaining clearly, the Soul Witch could not help but have a headache. How should she explain this to the Kelowna authority? Should she say with a smile, "Sorry everyone, this old man was locked up more than 100 years ago, so he did not know that you were officially established a few decades ago"? Like this? She would probably be scolded to death. "It's good that you understand." Miss Soul Witch sighed. "This world is different from your era. You should be more careful when doing things. After all, this is the East. Even if you don't know about the authority, have you not heard of the Kelowna Shinryu? If it was not for the extraordinary summit, I am afraid that we would have encountered the legendary invincible Eastern Dragon the moment we stepped into Kelowna. How could we let you fly in directly? How could I not think of that?" Farrell suddenly looked up. "I actually forgot, the Eastern Shinryu. She can be the counterforce. Damn it. I only thought of this now." Farrell, who was trembling with excitement, directly jumped down from the black dragon's head. The Soul Witch could not stop him even if she wanted to, this old man. Chapter 1920. Pung dash. With a loud noise, the trees in the small valley even shook slightly. The depths of the small valley seemed to have been smashed by a big rock from the sky. A pangolin that was digging here poked its head out of the soil and ran toward the depths of the small valley at a very fast speed. This was its territory, and it would treat this incident as an invasion of its territory. Soon, the pangolin had arrived at the place where the loud noise originated. A thin man in a wrinkled white casual suit was standing next to the big pit and looking around. Chirp, 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 chirp. The pangolin made a sound directly. It wanted to drive away the guy who destroyed its territory. The sound it made was instantly heard by the man. However, before the pangolin could react, the man had already appeared in front of it. He directly reached out and grabbed its neck, lifting it up. This pangolin was the size of an adult. The pangolin's eyes instantly turned red in anger. It waved its claws, which could easily cut through rocks. However, the man suddenly grabbed the pangolin's neck and pressed it directly to the ground. Bang dash! There was another loud noise. The pangolin only felt that its whole body was broken, and it was in extreme pain. However, something even more frightening was yet to come. The moment it opened its eyes, it saw that a huge, pitch-black creature had appeared in front of it at an unknown time. The pangolin instantly shouted at the man who attacked it. At the same time, a figure jumped down from the huge black shadow. The soul which landed beside Farrell. Seeing that he was holding a huge pangolin at this time, she was startled. "Old man, what have you done?" Farrell turned back and said, "Listen to what this thing has to say. Your soul power should be able to communicate directly. This is how I use it? Translator?" The soul which glared at Farrell fiercely, but before entering the anti-magic space, she couldn't win against this old man. She could only accept her fate and become a temporary translator. The power of the soul focus. Miss Witch's eyes gradually met the pangolin's eyes. "Who are you? Let me go. This is my home. You can't commit murder here. This is Lord Long's territory. You dare to do such a thing? Just wait for the Lord Long to deal with you." Earlier on, the Nordic ambassadors and the jungle mystics had been beaten up by the dragon basher because they had injured the old fox. "Let go of me. Let me go. One good news, one bad news." After some discussion, the witch looked at Farrell. "Which one do you want to hear?" Farrell just calmly glanced at the witch of the mind. The witch immediately shuddered. "The good news is that this demon-like pangolin should be able to help you find the legendary Shinryu of the East. The bad news is that this place seems to be the territory of the Shinryu of the East. By injuring this pangolin, you have offended the legendary Shinryu of the East. I am here for the greater good." Farlier said indifferently, "A small sacrifice is nothing. As the guardian of the East, he shouldn't be so petty. This is the bearing of a guardian. I will apologize for injuring this pangolin." There seemed to be no problem with his words, but there seemed to be a big problem. Miss Witch was stunned. The guardian of the East, the legendary invincible Kelowna Shinryu of the East, probably would be like what the old guy said? As the guardian of the divine land, he wouldn't be so calculative, right? No way, right? No way, right? "Take it, let's go to the city." Farrell had always been swift and decisive. At this time, he made a decision directly. The day before the meeting, the Mad Knight entered the city. Long Shirua knew where Emo Xiaofei lived, but it would take some time to get there from the pet hospital. After all, everyone lived in this forbidden city. Therefore, Kelowna Shinryu could only use Kelowna to take a taxi, which was expensive. Emo Xiaofei must have spent an uncomfortable night at home. When she called Emo Xiaofei out of the house, his face didn't look good. "I was nagged by my family for a whole night. My dad fell asleep at dawn. Who told you to go to the plateau in the west without saying a word?" Long Shirua pulled the ears of this cheap apprentice angrily. "Master, I told you that I went to the greedy wolf tribe." Emo Xiaofei rubbed his ears, feeling wronged. Long Shirua stopped, looking at Emo Xiaofei seriously. "You know why I came to you. What do you want to tell me?" Emo Xiaofei nodded. "Master, have you seen the thing I left for you?" "How did you get this thing?" Kelowna Shinryu asked directly. Emo Xiaofei said, "Let's go and meet with Purple Star first. It's better to talk about this matter together." Long Shiro looked at Emo Xiaofei doubtfully, then nodded. Where is the greedy wolf tribe's envoy now? It seems to be at a hotel called Song Dynasty. Emo Xiaofei thought for a while and said, Purple Star told me that their tribe was temporarily arranged to stay in this hotel by the administration. It seems that there are some people from the Dao Association in the hotel. Okay. Long Shiro nodded. Then let's find a place. Emo Xiaofei said, Master, wait for me. I'll go get the car and take you there. Kelowna Shinryu glanced at Emo Xiaofei in surprise. When did this guy learn how to drive? Did he really grow so much after a trip to the plateau in the west? Just here? Yes. I can ride very fast. Emo Xiaofei smiled proudly at this time. I added a cushion for you at the back seat, it will be more comfortable. With that said, Emo Xiaofei patted the back seat in his mouth. A black Phoenix brand bicycle. Kelowna Shinryu's eyes twitched a few times, and his crow's feet were almost pulled out. Then, he took out his phone. Kelowna taxi? How could the great Kelowna Shinryu laugh at the back seat of a bicycle? Song Dynasty Hotel, in the office of the CEO on the top floor. Song Ying was signing some daily documents, yawning from time to time. Last night, she chatted with Miss Zhang and didn't know how she ended the call. When she woke up in the morning, she was seriously sleep-deprived. She didn't expect that after entering society for several years, she would still talk to her friends on the phone late at night without sleeping like a high school girl. What was this? Regaining the innocence of a young girl? Bah! I'm still very innocent. At this time, the assistant outside the door called in from the intercom. Miss Song, a Miss Zhong is calling you. She said you will answer her call. Not answering. This was the first reaction of the Song family's granddaughter. Then, she realized, wait. Miss Zhong, what Miss Zhong? She said Zhong Luoyue, Miss Zhong. Song Ying's mouth opened slightly, and after blinking her eyes, she cleared her throat again, and even adjusted her collar before saying indifferently, put her through. Song Ying held the phone. The call was actually connected, but both parties didn't seem to want to take the initiative to speak. The granddaughter of the Song family still liked to take the initiative, so she chuckled and said, I've been wondering when you would call me. You can really endure it, senior sister Zhong. You didn't even think that I would call you, did you, Junior Song? Zhong Liyue's chuckle came from the other end of the phone. How is it? Are you comfortable after buying my Four Seasons hotel? Of course. Song Ying shrugged directly and said, After all, this is Senior Song's painstaking effort. How can I not be comfortable? Thank you, Senior Song. The current predecessor of the Royal Hotel was indeed Zhong Luoyue's Four Seasons Hotel. If it weren't for the existence of a ready-made hotel, Song Dynasty wouldn't have been able to stand in the city in such a short time. At first, Song Ying accompanied Luochio to come back according to the old man's wish. Originally, she just wanted to do some small business to test the water, but she met Zhong Luoyue, who suddenly sold the Four Seasons Hotel, so Song Ying took it without hesitation. Of course, she didn't use the name of Song Dynasty, but through other subsidiaries. However, Song Ying knew that Zhong Luoyue would know that she was the one behind the acquisition sooner or later. She was waiting to see Zhong Luoyue's ugly expression. However, she didn't expect that Zhong Luoyue didn't respond at all, as if she had evaporated. After a long time, Song Ying forgot about this matter. Junior sister, are you interested in meeting me? Zhong Luoyue suddenly said from the other end of the phone. I'm back. Song Ying couldn't help but be startled. At this time? Zhong Luoyue, who had been missing for a period of time, couldn't be found in the Song family headquarters in Beijing. However, at the critical moment when the extraordinary summit meeting was about to begin, she suddenly appeared. She pondered for a while and said, Time and place. I've sent a message to your assistant. Zhong Luoyue said indifferently, I'll meet you alone. Of course, if you're worried, it's fine to bring a bodyguard. I know that Junior Song has always been careful. The phone had been cut off. Song Ying immediately gritted her teeth and slapped the landline phone back. Bitch! Not bringing anyone. Do you think I'm stupid? She planned to bring a dozen bodyguards, armed to the teeth, and beat her up. Wow. McLaren 720S. As soon as the taxi driver from Shenzhou stopped in front of the Song Dynasty Hotel, a Helios orange sports car rushed out in an instant, followed by several black Alpha business cars. Looking at Emo Xiaofei, whose eyes were full of stars, Kelowna Shinryu, who had paid the fare reluctantly just now, squinted. What's 720? You don't understand, this is a man's romance. Emo Xiaofei shook his head. When can I have one? Long Shirua shook her head. She had no interest in these human vehicles, which were not only slow but also very expensive. Recently, the pet hospital was not open much. Kelowna Shinryu found that the low salary of the consultant position given to her by the administration was not enough to cover the expenses. It must be because the damn butterfly ate too much. Let's go in. Long Shirua said indifferently. Those guys from the Dao Sect Association also live here, I don't want to see them. With that, Kelowna Shinryu put on a hat, sunglasses, and a mustache. Emo Xiaofei was stunned. Did he feel that this was more eye-catching? Purple Star had already arranged for a warrior of the Greedy Wolf clan to welcome them. Both the Dao Sect Association and the Monster Race Association were arranged to stay in Song Dynasty Hotel. Of course, the two areas were separated, with only a courtyard in the middle connecting them. The representatives of the Dao Sect Association had basically checked in, but only the Greedy Wolf clan stayed in the Monster Race Association. The rest of the Monster Race were having an illegal gathering in front of Kelowna Shinryu's house. But even with the accompaniment of the Greedy Wolf clan, Long Shirua and Emo Xiaofei still had to go through the strict inspection of the agents from the administration. You, take off your sunglasses, and tear off this trashy fake mustache. How dare you embarrass yourself with such an inferior disguise? Emo Xiaofei instantly knew that he was in trouble. Sure enough, when the black-faced Kelowna Shinryu took off his sunglasses and tore off his mustache, the agents from the administration standing guard in front of him suddenly felt their legs go soft and couldn't move. Come, tell me your names, positions, and employee numbers. Be good, I just want to know, I won't take revenge on you. Kelowna Shinryu smiled and said, You should know me, I'm the most magnanimous. I'll never be calculative. How could I do such a despicable thing as making things difficult for others? You will. You definitely will. I don't remember when it happened. I only know that a hothead accidentally offended Consultant Long, and he was still cleaning the toilets of the administration headquarters. The famous saying of the administration, You offended Consultant Long, and you still want to get promoted? We were wrong. We'll reflect on ourselves. Long Shiro rolled her eyes and waved her hand, saying directly, Can I go in now? Of course. Of course. Long Shiro hummed again. I don't want too many people to know that I'm here. We know what to do, Consultant Long. Everyone nodded quickly. Kelowna Shinryu looked at the Greedy Wolf clan soldiers and said indifferently, Lead the way. Kelowna Shinryu put on his sunglasses again and stuck on his mustache. He was quite persistent. Should we report it or not? Do you want to die cleaning toilets for the rest of your life? Even if we report it, the higher-ups can't do anything to Consultant Long. It's useless to report it, but we offended her instead. Who in the administration doesn't know that Consultant Long is the most narrow-minded? Let's play cards. Okay. The Greedy Wolf clan soldier who was leading the way was a bit nervous. After all, the person behind him was the legend of Kelowna Land. He felt that he could brag about it for the rest of his life when he got close to the dragon god of Kelowna Land. Lord Long, if we go through this courtyard, we will reach the place where our young master is currently living. Okay. Long Shiro replied indifferently and casually glanced at the courtyard. At this moment, there was a man and a woman in the courtyard. The woman was sitting in front of a stone table with a straight posture and closed eyes. As for the man, he was standing with his legs apart, which was the most basic stance of a martial artist. Kelowna Shinryu frowned subconsciously. Long Shirua felt that this woman in a simple white training suit was somewhat special. It was just that the forbidden law of the city severely restricted her inspiration. "Who is inside?" Long Shirua asked subconsciously. The greedy Wolf Clan soldier took a look and continued, "That man seems to be the newly appointed secretary of the Tao Sect Association. When young master moved in yesterday, he came over to greet him. As for the woman, I don't know." Secretary. Long Shirua was deep in thought. At this moment, the woman in white, who was resting with her eyes closed in the courtyard, suddenly opened her eyes. Her gaze was sharp, and she looked straight at them. She seemed to have felt the gaze of the true dragon of the divine land, and she looked back at him. What happened? Song Howren, who was practicing his stance, seemed to have sensed something and asked curiously. "Nothing, don't stop slacking," the woman in white said indifferently, but her gaze was still locked on Kelowna Shinryu. "I wonder where this expert came from," the woman in white thought to herself. But at this moment, the woman in white saw Imo Xiaofei, who was following beside Kelowna Shinryu. In an instant, the woman in white stood up abruptly. "This is Father. Hashtag 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 PS. As usual. Chapter 1921. Miss Maid hung up yesterday's clothes and returned to the living room. She was more like a virtuous hostess when she was not wearing a maid suit. "Master, do you have any dishes you want to eat at noon? There should be a lot of materials left last night, so I don't need to buy any more today," Boss Luo said casually, and then picked up the remote control to change the channel. This was probably the most magical TV in the world. Miss Maid glanced at it expressionlessly. The master finally changed from Shinryu TV to another channel. Maybe it was boring to take a taxi in Kelowna. The scene changed to a small valley outside the city. "Isn't this the legendary Evilest Night?" Miss Maid said indifferently. "It seems that this meeting is really lively." But Boss Luo quickly changed the channel again. The scene changed to a hotel in a guest house. Now it was Xiao Shitai. "Well, murder, I like this program." Boss Luo took a sip of water and smiled. "Let's play a game of guessing who is the murderer. This seems to be the effect of some secret medicine. Of course, it just looks like it. If we can check it directly, we will probably know what the cause of death is." She sat down with her legs together and leaned against the wall. She seemed to be interested in it. Miss Maid smiled slightly. In fact, as long as it was not Shinryu TV, it was fine. Anyway, it was just to pass the time. It may not be supernatural power, but it must be related to supernatural power. Soon, there were preliminary results for the examination of the priest from the non-Middle-earth continent. The traditional forensic medicine system was naturally impossible. The autopsy was carried out by more professional talents in the administration. They also used new equipment that was different from the traditional ones. There was a small episode in this that was the administration's equipment update during this period was a little excessive. It was even to the extent that new equipment could be developed every week. This was all thanks to the wansu or mother lode that the administration later obtained from the Punglai treasure house. Under the effect of wansu, a strange mineral that could synthesize any substance, the crazy ideas stored in the minds of scientists were gradually realized. "What do you mean?" Yen Xiaoxi asked with a frown. He had already met the leaders of the other 3 supernatural groups in the guest house, but he did not find anything useful. Black Uncle Shaman had indeed died mysteriously in his room without anyone noticing. Although we are forbidden, it doesn't mean that we can't use any supernatural powers, the inspector said. For example, we detected a very strong poison in the body of the deceased. This kind of poison cannot be concocted by ordinary people. It must be synthesized through extraordinary means. It's obvious that it worked, turning all the tissues under the victim's skin into pus. Do you mean that the transcendent being's poison won't be affected by the restrictive spell? Yan Xiaoxi's expression froze. You could say that. The commissioner nodded. But at the end of the day, although poison is made in an extraordinary way, it is not out of the realm of chemistry. Therefore, it can be used. Section Chief Yan, although our Dao weapons can't be used, conventional weapons are normal. All weapons under normal physical and chemical reactions are normal. It's the same principle. Using supernatural powers to create a superstandard weapon, poison. Yan Xiaoxi nodded and said, Then, can we control the timing of the poison? Since no one entered the guest house last night, it's also possible that the victim was poisoned before he moved in? We can't rule out that possibility, and it's very likely, the commissioner said after giving it some thought. Yan Xiaoxi pinched his forehead and said with a bitter smile, In that case, I'm afraid we don't have enough time to investigate, and we don't have enough time either. If this is not the only case. The commissioner had also thought of the terrifying part. The poison that could turn a person's body into pus was really terrifying. Besides, they still did not know how the poison was used. I'll bring some samples back immediately. I hope the headquarters can analyze its medicinal properties as soon as possible. As soon as possible, I'll arrange for someone to escort you back. Yan Xiaoxi nodded and said, There's no time to lose. Set off now. I'll explain to the headquarters. After sending the commissioner off, Yan Xiaoxi immediately ordered someone to check on the chefs in the guest house and the waiters who were in charge of distributing the food. She also checked on all the water sources in the guest house. We get the ingredients from the farmer's market every day. We don't have to go out to buy them. It's none of my business. I just left after delivering the food to this floor as usual. They brought the food back to their rooms themselves. It's really none of my business. They checked one by one mainly on the victim's food, the water source that he drank, and the people that he came into contact with. However, they still did not find anything. They did not find the method or the person who poisoned the victim. All of this seemed to indicate that the victim had already been poisoned before he entered the guest house. The members of the diplomatic mission rushed to Yan Xiaoxi agitatedly and demanded an explanation from Kelowna. Their great priest had died in this place, and this was the most vicious provocation to their tribe. Yan Xiaoxi was not afraid that the diplomatic mission would cause a commotion. However, if this incident caused the transcendent tribes in the African continent to develop negative feelings toward the Chinese who were investing in the African continent and secretly sabotaging them, it would be quite a headache. Don't worry, we'll definitely find the culprit. Yan Xiaoxi had no choice but to promise, this is not only about you. This is also a provocation to the Kelowna authority. We won't let this go. It was an official statement. So, at this time, Section Chief Yan directly changed the topic. In order to find the murderer as soon as possible, I hope that you can cooperate with our investigation. From now on, everyone in the guest house must be under the supervision of the administration until we find the murderer. Everyone here is suspected of murder. What did you say? The diplomatic mission members who had lost their priest were enraged as they were the victims. Faced with the ferocious grassland warriors, Section Chief Yan was very straightforward. He glanced around and the agents around him waved their hands in unison. They did not take out their conventional firearms and only waved the folding sticks in their hand. However, these were sticks that could release high-voltage electricity. In a city that had lost supernatural powers, there were not many supernatural beings who could resist technological weapons. As for combat, the authority had never lacked talents in that field. Seeing that everyone was silent, Yan Xiaoxi calmly said, Thank you for your cooperation. Don't worry, apart from not being able to leave the guest house and not being able to contact the outside world, you are free to move around here. However, I hope that if we need any of you to assist us, you will be the first to come. With that, after the angry grassland warriors were temporarily taken away, Yan Xiaoxi finally had time to calm down and think about their next move. By the way, has old Fu arrived at the scene of the incident? Yan Xiaoxi suddenly asked. We've already arrived. Boss Fu is currently investigating. We should have news back soon, the subordinate quickly replied. Yan Xiaoxi nodded. As one of his assistants, Fu Mingxian was supposed to come with him. However, on the way to the guest house, Yan Xiaoxi received news that one of the authorities' drones had been shot down in the sky. The person who shot it had already taken a photo, but it was a rather unfamiliar face. The authorities' database did not have any relevant records, so Section Chief Yan could only arrange for Fu Mingxian to go out of the city to investigate. Got it. Yan Xiaoxi nodded and then said, Get me all the surveillance footage of the guest house for the past week. I want to see it myself. I'll do it right away. The jeep soon drove into a small valley. There were 3 people in the jeep. Apart from Fu Mingxian, there were 2 other mid-level agents from the authority. The 2 mid-level agents were obviously Fu Mingxian's confidant. Boss Fu, according to the last location where the signal disappeared, it should be around here. Fu Mingxian nodded. Then, another subordinate quickly said, We detected a wave of abnormal energy in front that is weakening. They soon arrived at the place where the wave came from and found a big pit. In the big pit, they even found a pair of footprints. This seems to be caused by the impact of falling from a high altitude. Who could be so hard? They carefully observed the surroundings of the big pit. There are several different sets of footprints here. It seems that the person went in this direction and shouldn't have gone far. If we chase now, we might be able to catch up. Let's track it and take a look. Fu Mingxian nodded and then said, Call back and tell the section chief the results of the preliminary investigation here. I seem to have smelled the scent of a demon. There should be at least 1 demon living nearby. Maybe we can ask something. Then, Fu Mingxian leaped into the forest. This was no longer a restricted area, so it was much more convenient for them to do things here. Searching according to the smell, Fu Mingxian quickly found a cave. There were still some electrical appliances inside. The cave was full of demon aura. There was indeed a demon living here for a long time. However, he didn't find any demon, so he had to go back the way he came. However, when Fu Mingxian returned to the place where he found the deep pit, a strong smell of blood filled the air. Fu Mingxian was shocked and quickened his pace, only to find that 2 of his subordinates had died tragically in the jeep at this moment. Their heads had been cut off, and they were directly hung on the ground by branches. A chill instantly spread all over Fu Mingxian's body. In this horror, Fu Mingxian subconsciously turned around, but he saw that a black shadow had appeared behind him without him knowing. Fu Mingxian was shocked, but the black shadow flashed and disappeared from his sight. The senior agent of the agency stood motionless at this time. After a long time, his head slowly fell from his neck. The investigation team of 3 was wiped out. In an antique courtyard, Kelowna's Shinryu finally saw the young master of the Greedy Wolf clan, Zixing. This young master of the Greedy Wolf clan, who had been strictly raised since childhood, was still quite respectful to Kelowna's dragon god. He directly bowed when he saw her. What a sensible guy, Long Shirua thought in her heart. He is much more sensible than the group of shameless people in front of her house. Look at the little girl of the Greedy Wolf clan, TSK. Is Zhuefeng okay? As soon as he sat down, Kelowna's Shinryu didn't directly ask about the metal fragment. Instead, he asked about Zhuefeng, the reincarnation of the current Greedy Wolf star. Master Taixingjun is fine. Zixing knelt in front of Long Shiro at this time and said sternly, Master Taixingjun is currently in the clan shrine, comprehending the magical power of Greedy Wolf Star. Long Shirua didn't have much reaction to this. She just nodded and said indifferently, It's fine as long as the kid is willing. So, why did you ask me to come? The thing Mo Xiaofei sent me should be your idea, right? Mo Xiaofei, who was sitting next to her, had to smile awkwardly, then quickly said, Master, I'll go outside and get you a glass of water. Long Shirua didn't ask him to stay at this time. If this was Mo Xiaofei's matter, he wouldn't deliberately ask her to come to greedy wolf Zixing. Obviously, Zixing wanted her to come through Mo Xiaofei. TSK, this shameless girl is so bad. After Mo Xiaofei went out, Long Shirua looked at Zixing and said directly, "Tell me, why are you looking for me?" Greedy wolf young master smiled mysteriously. "Before this, don't you want to know the origin of this metal fragment? The words engraved on it are the most ancient characters of Kelowna. Say it or not." Long Shirua snorted coldly and threw the box with the fragment in her hand in front of Zixing. "I'll give you 1 minute. Find a way to keep me here." The young master of Greedy Wolf Clan looked dignified and said slowly, "Master Long Jun, do you know the Immortal Palace?" "Immortal Palace?" Long Shirua couldn't help being stunned. "What's that? A new organization made by some bored guys?" Zixing shook her head, then said seriously, "I'm talking about the legendary Immortal Palace of the Heavenly Court, the Immortal Palace where there are real immortals." "You little girl, who are you?" Shinryu of Kelowna couldn't help but open his mouth at this time. They probably didn't quarrel. Mo Xiaofei was looking at the sky worriedly in the small courtyard outside. In fact, he didn't know what was given to his master. He just did it at the request of Zixing. Well, seeing that Zhuifeng had an ambiguous relationship with Zixing, it's not easy to be a big brother, Mo Xiaofei thought. At this moment, a figure slowly walked into this small courtyard. Mo Xiaofei heard the footsteps. He turned around and found that the person was the man who stood in the stance he saw before. "Hello! You are?" The man smiled at this time. "Someone wants to see you. Is it convenient?" "See me?" Mo Xiaofei was surprised. "Who wants to see me?" "You'll know when you see her." The man blinked and said, "She asked me to invite you. If I can't invite you, I may have to stand in the horse stance for the whole day. You see, I got up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I haven't drunk a drop of water yet." Standing at 5 o'clock in the morning until now, he hasn't drunk a drop of water. This guy is so miserable. At the same time, he can bear hardships, Mo Xiaofei thought. Mo Xiaofei thought for a while and said, "Okay, I'll go with you." "Where is she?" "Please follow me." Song Howren smiled slightly and said, "By the way, let me introduce myself. My name is Song Howren. ########PS 1/1